Okay, we'll start in just a moment. Welcome everyone this morning to the Board of Supervisor meeting for Tuesday, March 11th. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have the roll call, please.
Supervisor Groom.
Present.
Supervisor Horsley.
Present.
Supervisor Slocum.
Here.
Supervisor Tissier.
Here.
President Pine.
Here. Thank you. As usual, we have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and this is a time where individuals can comment on items that are not on the agenda, that are listed on the consent agenda, or anything related to the county manager's report or the board member's report. I do have a couple of slips, and each speaker will have 2 minutes. We'll begin with Therese Dyer.
Drive in Pacifica. After the last county supervisor meeting, I was emailed by attorney Marty Fox that Mr. Wagstaff would like me to contact Bill Massey, inspector, which I will do, but I'd like you to know that I will be presenting to him 28 letters of communication from the city of Pacifica, the county, which includes my claim, letters from judges pro tems, county recorder, letter to and from Pappen, Jackie Spear, Tom Lantos, Diane Feinstein, Attorney General Lundgren, and Frank Figglesby from the Department of Justice. And in one of my requests under public records, I asked the total amount we paid for 26 lawyers that the county has under their employ. I was told to go to the website. This is not an appropriate answer because it's against the ADA, American Disability Act. But thanks to the Daily Post, it was posted on February 18th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dyer.
Oh, by the way, I gave you each a copy of Paul Schmidt's letter to the editor, which talks about the corruption in the DA's office. Thank you.
Mr. Roger Medler.
Good morning. Anyway, I'm just up here to practice my public speaking for today. Anyway, Mr. Silverman actually emailed me to see how things were going yesterday, and I really appreciate that. So that's something that Pacifica would never do. I mentioned to the city council in Pacifica how much I appreciate your help. And anyway, I was talking to the city manager and the police chief, and I'm waiting for their response. And it was mentioned that Mrs. Linfo, the city manager, was first email was to say that she don't think she can do much for me, but she will listen. So that was not very encouraging. So that pretty well tells you where things were going before the meeting. But we'll see what happens. And thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Medler. Marty Fox. Marty, would you be okay if I gave you a little extra time on item 10, because there's the 10 kind of responding to adults with mental illness. Would it be okay if you spoke there, or do you feel a need to speak now? The latter, yeah. All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Then we have 3 final speakers who would like to address an item which is on the consent calendar. That's the base matter. We'll start with Peter Cagle. And Mr. Cagle, you have 2 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Peter Cagle. I represent Bay Area Catering and Events. We approve of the remanding to the Planning Commission. We asked that the Planning Commission handle this at the end of their last meeting in April, because we're expecting to have our bids completed by then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cagle. Janet Davis.
I object to this being remanded for all the reasons I stated in my memo. You don't have any actual facts as to the money spent, and I think this is just egregious. You have a letter apparently from the attorney which gives a list of figures which I think are pure fabrication. I think this is unequal treatment because a lot of other people might want a reconsideration and they don't get it. There's absolutely no reason why this business should continue. It's been declared a public nuisance, and that's grounds for terminating the use. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And we have a final speaker on the Wheeler Plaza matter, and that is our clerk, Becky Romero. So Becky, you can change your position. You can, yes, of course, you could, yes, that's right. You can speak from there.
Good morning, Supervisor Pine and other board members, John and John. Thank you for letting me speak this morning. I am speaking on the Wheeler Plaza project. I understand, the redevelopment of the building at 1245 San Carlos Avenue, but I'm really opposed to the building having to be condominiums. I don't know why the city of San Carlos didn't think outside the box and consider other options. I've lived in San Carlos since 1990, and this is the first I heard of the project. San Carlos is not San Francisco. We don't need to build on top of ourselves like they do. The whole concept of condos and retail space is such a crowded city approach to a problem of needed housing. I'd like to use the address of 1001 Laurel as an example, which is exactly condos and retail space. It was built and completed in 2009, and units started selling in the early 2010. The last unit didn't sell until finally December of 2013. The retail space at the bottom of this building has yet to be 100% full. There are only two occupants, and one is a lawyer's office and the other is a financial planner. So neither one is really a retail space. I moved to San Carlos because it's truly a family city, family friendly, with a wonderful downtown that's very eclectic and doesn't look like Burlingame Avenue with its big box stores, which I really enjoy not having. Those are some of the reasons I moved there. I have friends who will come from across the bay because they love the downtown, and they'll meet me there anytime I call. And I'd like to San Carlos to consider maintaining, the small town character that it has, and not fall victim to the big box stores mentality. I hope San Carlos council members would have taken an opportunity like this to think outside the condo box. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Romero. You definitely want to share those remarks with the City Council for San Carlos. Our action today is on the consent calendar is simply to not take that parcel or force a sale of the particular parcel, and the City of San Carlos will need to work through their planning decisions. But thank you for your comments. All right, we will now set the agenda and approve the consent items. Is there anything that anyone will want to remove, or?
No, I'll move to set the agenda and to approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
A motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. All right, we have a very full morning of presentations and awards. So I think there's probably about maybe an hour and 15 minutes or so. So very excited to have a chance to recognize a lot of great people in the community. Our first item is Supervisor Slocum, presentation of a commendation to the Sequoia High School DECA Business Club.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Today we're going to honor, as President Pine mentioned, members of the Sequoia High School DECA Business Club who are with us today. And they had participated in a stock market game in the first year of the club's existence. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in just a moment. But in the first year that the club was formed, they placed in the top 25 for the 2013-14 stock market game for the Western United States region. They invested up to 3 stocks over a 4-month period, which ran from September to December 2013. And they had a 29% return on their money. now they're going to move on and compete in DECA's International Career Development Conference in Atlanta in early May of this year. So DECA stands for Delta Epsilon Chi Association, which began as a college fraternal organization, was founded in 1946 with a mission to prepare emerging leaders and entrepreneurs for careers in marketing, finance, hospitality, and management in high schools and colleges around the globe. The DECA's high school division includes more than 190,000 members in 3,500 schools across the country. DECA has members in all 50 of the states, the District of Columbia, Canada, China, Germany, Guam, Hong Kong, Korea, Mexico, and Puerto Rico. And joining us today, first let me introduce to you Bonnie Hansen, who is the Sequoia High School principal. Bonnie, do you want to stand up? Thank you.
I just want you to know that I now have these gentlemen managing the school budget.
Very good. We might turn over a portion of the county's investment pool at a 29% return. That would be certainly higher than what we're getting. The teacher advisor who guided these young people, Stephen Wong, is here. Thank you, Stephen. And the parent advisor, Virginia Corrali, who most of you probably know, or all of you know. Virginia? Yep, stand up. Thank you. And the members of the DECA team who got a 29% return. Paul Corrali, you might recognize that last name. Thank you, Paul. Wyatt Duncan.
Thank you, everyone. We greatly appreciate this, by the way.
James Corrali, the treasurer. Let's keep it in the family. Dominic Clark. Thank you, Dominic. Cole Driver. Gray Laura. Dylan Lubbock. Did I pronounce that right? And Timmy, whose last name is I can't pronounce. Tanta Villeson, something like that, right? Is he here? No, okay, he couldn't be here. So maybe you all would like to come down and I'll hand you these commendations and we'll take some pictures. And then if one of you would like to address the board, you're welcome to do that also, okay? So everybody, Stephen Wong and the rest, come on down. I thought of that too.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Wong, and I'm a math teacher at Sequoia High School for the past 9 years. On behalf of our Sequoia DECA Business Club, I would like to thank everyone for inviting us here. And I'm also very delighted to know that our fabulous Sequoia principal, Bonnie Hansen, she is here to support us. Thank you, Bonnie. Last year, two of my students, Paul Corrali and Wyatt Duncan, from my Algebra 2 class, approached me to advise the business club. However, I turned down the kids because I'm already overwhelmed with being a 2 advisor for being a chess club advisor and badminton club advisor. But these kids, they are very persistent. They come back every week and with many reasons why Sequoia should have a business club. So I started digging in a little bit, and then I realized that our amazing school offer a lot of great programs, such as college level linear algebra class, theory of knowledge, and many, many support classes. However, we don't have any econ or AP business class. So I did a little research online, and I found out that the number of kids who minor and major in business, it is close to 50% of all fields, 50%. So I feel that the students at Sequoia High School should have an opportunity to learn about the business world, and I don't want any of kids to fall behind. And in order to create a way for students to educate themselves about business and entrepreneurship, I finally decided to start the club at Sequoia High School. Since I wanted my kids to simulate business activity as if they were in the real world, we decided to join DECA. And DECA stands for Distributive Education Clubs of America, and it is an international association of high school and college students. And it was founded in the year of 1946, and it has right now, currently 200,000 members. Every year, students can choose various topics in business and investment to distinguish themselves from the best of the best. And this year, our club decided to compete in online stock market game. Under the leadership of our President Paul and Vice President Wyatt, our stock portfolio was very successful. At the game's conclusion, Paul and Wyatt's portfolio was ranked 4th highest in return on investment in California with a return rate of 29% in 4 months, and 15th highest in the Western region. Sequoia High School will be one of the 3 schools in California that will represent DECA's Western region of the United States. And we have a huge opportunity to compete in Atlanta for DECA's International Career Development Conference in May 2nd to 7th of this year. During club meeting times on Wednesdays, our students have been reading books and practicing investment strategies through online stock simulators, where you can buy and sell stocks. Although our club is only less than 1 year old, our future is very bright, because all these hardworking kids who are eager to learn about business and environment and investment. Now, I would like to hand the mic to our president, Paul Corrali, to say a few things about our club. Paul?
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the investment strategies we used to get the returns that we did. So the first thing we did was really examine the rules. And so we just noticed that we start with $100,000. You need to buy a minimum of 3 stocks, and the fee is pretty expensive, so we had to take that into consideration. It was 1% of the purchase plus $100 per transaction, and there was a 4-month time period, and we had to buy a minimum of 100 shares per company. So since it was only a 4-month time period, we realized that we wanted volatile stocks with a high upside that had relatively high stock prices so that we could use our $100 the most effectively with few companies as possible, and thereby lowering our transaction fees. So the 3 companies that we ended up choosing were Netflix, Chipotle, and 3D Systems, all of which had relatively high stock prices and we thought were solid companies. We thought that if the market we thought that the market was going to end in a pretty strong position after a huge bull run at the beginning of the whole year, and these companies would all have a great opportunity to surge at the end of the year, which they did. As Mr. Wong said, we returned 29% in those 4 months, placed 4th in California and 15th in the Western region, and we are going to go to Atlanta to compete at the international conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and again, congratulations. Our next presentation will be started by Supervisor Adrian Tissier, honoring Joe Cutchett.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say something to Joe. You might look at some future business managers there for your firm, or perhaps some attorneys for the firm. Anyway, it gives me great pleasure to introduce this proclamation for Joseph W. Cachette Day in San Mateo County. I doubt there's anybody in this room that doesn't know who Joe is, but over the span of 5 decades, he's provided outstanding public service to the residents of San Mateo County and has come to be regarded by his peers as one of the most well-respected and influential lawyers of our time. But let me just give you a little bit of a background. He attended Cal Poly State University, having earned a bachelor's degree in engineering, and then went on to USF Law School, having earned his Juris Doctorate. But then he later joined the Armed Services, and when you hear his positions, you won't be surprised. His duties include the United States Army Intelligence Corps, Special Forces Paratrooper, and JAGS Corps officer until he retired from the active reserves in 1991. In 1967, he founded his firm Cachette, Petrie, and McCarthy, which has become one of the most successful firms in defense of consumers and public interest law, having recovered hundreds of millions of dollars in antitrust, major corporate fraud, and securities cases. So he and his firm have the extraordinary reputation, and well-deserved, as a firm that advocates on behalf of underdogs seeking justice against powerful interests. The fortunate part for us here at the county is he and his attorneys in his firm have partnered with our county in many recent cases involving matters of extraordinary public interest. And they include litigation resulting in a trial court award of $1.15 billion against lead paint manufacturers for lead abatement, in which San Mateo County received $57 million. He's also helped us against the officers, directors, and accountants of Lehman Brothers, as you recall, in which the directors and officers have recently settled for $5.2 million to date. He's also been involved with municipal derivatives litigation, challenging financial institutions' bid rigging practices that artificially depress San Mateo County's rate of return on municipal derivatives, resulting in settlements in excess of $750,000 paid to the county. And he's also done litigation for us against financial institutions for their conspiring to fix the LIBOR rate, which is used worldwide to set interest rates. So Joe and his firm have also, not only do they practice terrific law and have helped our county considerably, but he and his firm also are very philanthropic. And they sit on numerous boards here in our county. I sat on one with one of their attorneys, a Community Gate Path, but they've been instrumental with Second Harvest Food Bank, Rebuilding Together, San Mateo Legal Aid, St. Anthony's Foundation. These are just to name a few. So not only do they do extraordinary law, have helped us pro bono here on many cases at the county, but have also helped the community as a whole. Joe himself has received numerous prestigious awards and honors, being named one of the 100 most influential lawyers in the nation for 15 years running, and the #1 lawyer in Northern California by Super Lawyers, and listed in every edition of Best Lawyers in America since its inception, and in 1999 was inducted into the Litigation Trial Lawyers Hall of Fame by the California Bar Association. So we wanted to make this special day for Joe and his firm for all the great work they've done for us here at the county, and I know our County Counsel, John Byers, who gets to work with them very continually, has a few words to say as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Tissier, for the opportunity to congratulate Joe and really his entire the entire law firm of Cachette, Petrie, and McCarthy for this honor. Just recently, I learned that the Cachette, Petrie, and McCarthy firm was named again by the National Law Journal as one of the top 20 litigation firms in the country. And so we're fortunate that they are here in our backyard in San Mateo County. I and members of my office have very much enjoyed the partnership. You mentioned this partnership. It really is a partnership, and we've had this partnership with Joe and his law firm for many years on so many important public interest cases on behalf of the county and the taxpayers, and not the least of which is the very recent decision we received in the lead paint case that Supervisor Tissier mentioned. That that was a landmark decision, of which as you mentioned, $1.15 billion were awarded against 3 lead paint manufacturers, of which $57 million is hopefully going to come to our county for lead abatement. And that case took 14 years. And with the Board of Supervisors' vision and courage and resolve to continue the fight, we never gave up. And we continued to fight. There were a lot of naysayers, and we had we had big law firms and batteries of lawyers on behalf of the lead paint manufacturers coming up against against us. I mean, batteries of lawyers for 14 years, and the case finally got to trial in 2013. And the court found very, very clearly that these lead paint companies were clearly continuing to promote lead paint, while clearly also knowing that this lead paint was toxic and causing brain damage in children. That was a landmark decision, and just one of many decisions that we worked with the Cachette firm on. So, on behalf of my office, Joe, and I just want to say it's been very, very fun and rewarding working with you and members of your team on so many cases, many of which are currentently pending. And I want to call out just a few folks that we've worked very closely with in your firm. And one of them is sitting next to you, Mark Malumphy, your partner, Mark. We spent a lot of time with Mark in court and around the country on these cases. And Mark's a very, very fine, talented lawyer. Also want to mention Nancy Nishimura, Nancy Feynman, and Matt Edling for all their contributions to the county. So again, I congratulations and look forward to the continued good fight.
So Joe, if you will join us up here at the dais, and I'm going to make a motion to accept this proclamation.
Second?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
All right, we're all going to come
We're all
up, 'cause
gonna
we
come
all
up,
want to
Joe.
say thank you.
I really want to thank everyone here in this audience who are attending today for this, and especially the board and John Byers, John Maltby, of course. When we started this case 14 years ago, very few counties and/or cities wanted to join. This is all about children. We know that lead paint, John, as you mentioned, affects, and to be brutally candid with you, we're talking about minority children who live in substandard housing and/or public housing that hasn't been painted in years. The lead paint, for everybody knows, disintegrates off the walls. Children walk around on the floors, put their fingers in their mouth. In one county that we represent, Los Angeles, 16,000 children have been diagnosed last year with toxic poisoning. Excuse me. So, who does this proclamation really go to? It goes to the board and to people like John Byers, because they're the people that stood up 14 years ago and said, let's do something about this. Mark and I have been honored to represent the county, the cities. We're just the vehicle by which we can do this. The vehicle meaning we take the train down the tracks, but the train doesn't get on the tracks until a very courageous board of supervisors and courageous county councils start that engine going. I want people to understand that. When this verdict just came in, this $1.5 billion, we received calls from, and I'm going to just say it straight out, the County of Sacramento Board of Supervisors, the Fresno County Board of Supervisors, and the Orange County Board of Supervisors, who asked, where were we? And I said, unfortunately, 13 years ago, when all the county boards were notified of this suit, they didn't have the courage, the integrity, or the guts to do it because they were threatened by the paint companies. But that board did. So that's who the award goes to. Thank you very much. I want to just ask Mark Lumpy to stand up, if you would. I apologize, my voice is gone this morning. Mark, stand up. Mark was the person that carried the water on the Lehman case. And in the Lehman case, just quickly to let you know, Lehman went bankrupt. So we went after their directors. And I remember one night on ABC television, I put my finger up to the television and I said to Richard Fuld, the CEO, you can run, but you can't hide. And we went after the directors who all thought they were off the hook. Well, they weren't off the hook because we went after them personally and we were able to deliver a very nice check. They finally, after nailing them in a New York court, they put up some millions of dollars. By the way, off the record, I think one of it came from one of their wives. You may have read in the paper about a $13 million home that was transferred to her for $100 for, quote, estate planning. And again, the courage, where does that go? It goes to people like John Byers, who said to us, let's go after these directors. No other county in the country, no other entity, public entity in the country did it except San Mateo County and one or two small cities. And right standing there is Mark, who went after them in New York City, overnight planes, red eyes, back and forth to bring back justice for this county. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe Kachette. We are so indebted to you and your firm for what you've done for our county, our community, and the nation at large. We are very indebted.
We're going to excuse ourselves if you don't mind. Mark and I are in a meeting up in San Francisco. We are currently going after J.P. Morgan.
Yeah, all right.
On behalf of San Mateo County and other counties.
Do you need a ride, Joe? We'll take you there. Thank you.
He really is a champion for justice.
We'll now move to a presentation, a resolution honoring Dean Peterson. Supervisor Horsley.
Well, it's my pleasure to have this resolution. So first of all, I'm going to have a motion to pass this resolution honoring Dean David Peterson.
Second.
Third.
Motion a second. All in favor? Aye.
I just want to, I don't normally read proclamations, but there are so many things that talk about his accomplishments, and I'm just going to go through some of them. He actually began in 1985, so he has about just roughly 25 years of service for the county. But he developed and implemented San Mateo County's local oversight program to protect our groundwater from leaking underground storage tanks, designed and implemented the clean closure of 3 landfills off of Skyline Road, returning them to open space, designed and implemented a removal of 50 derelict boats from the Smith and West Point Slough in Redwood City. As a director, he led a multifaceted team of, it goes on to, dedicated professionals. And I've seen him actually out inspecting restaurants and making sure that all of it, he's one of those managers who are actually, you can hear the footfalls on the factory floor. He actually goes out and makes and checks and makes sure that all of his staff is actually doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And then he implemented a countywide approach to reduce youth access to tobacco via a tobacco retail license ordinance. He worked with the Sheriff's Department on that at the time. He led statewide efforts to ban the use of trans fats and required menu labeling at retail food establishments. And there's a whole bunch of other things that he has done. But I think the thing that I think all of us remember most is his work with us on the plastic bag ordinance. And if you hadn't seen him in his plastic bag suit, you really missed something. And he went around, and he did this on his own time. He did it on Saturdays and Sundays to promote really, this plastic bag ban, which has resulted in really the elimination of a whole lot of junk that normally would end up in our streams, in our lakes, and in the ocean. So with that, I just really honored to be able to present this proclamation, and I think Gene Fraser would also like to speak.
Thank you, Supervisor Horsley. I'm sorry I'm under the weather, so I will be shorter than normal, which is hard to do because Dean is such an extraordinary staff member of the health system. We are very sorry to be losing him. What I particularly want to call out, which is exactly what you have mentioned, is that not only has Dean been an extraordinary manager of the traditional functions of environmental health, making sure that our restaurants and our water and our housing is safe for our residents, but what he has done is really become a leader in the environmental movement, understanding that if we keep our cities free of plastic bags, if we keep them free of styrofoam, if we start to remove these environmental hazards, that is where we really ensure the public's health. And so I want to compliment Dean not only on being an extraordinary manager, but being an extraordinary leader for the health system and in the environmental health field. We will be very sorry to lose you, but we look forward to many pictures of you in your kayak.
With that, Dean, would you come up?
So this certainly could have gone on to consent, but thank you very much for putting it on the regular. Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I normally don't write speeches, but I did. I probably won't follow it. But environmental health means many things to many different people. I mean, and I'm known out there with a number of different hats. People look at me as the restaurant guy, they look at me as the plastic bag guy. Very few people know me for the full encompass of the things we do, and I think the board understands and gets that. Throughout my personal and professional career, I've been incredibly fortunate to have worked and be associated with organizations that have shared my desire, as Jean mentioned, to ensure that our environment is safe for the public's health. Be it my 14-year involvement with the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, my time spent as a civilian with the U.S. Navy, testing, removing underground storage tanks, working on old munition dumps throughout California and Nevada on circle sites, really cut my teeth on the engineering side of it. And then, of course, my 26 years with San Mateo County, where I've had the privilege to work with a dedicated staff, enforcing and educating through a varying array of environmental health. And obviously, the division could not do this without support. And I'm not going to be able to even get close to naming all the people in the departments that have supported us, but I do want to call out one, and that's our county council's office. Working at the state level, I have a chance to speak with environmental health directors at different counties and agencies, and every time we talk about county council, they usually grimace and they get worried that they call them. I actually have always enjoyed getting called by county council. I enjoyed visiting them. To a person there, they have supported the division in everything we need to do, and it's been amazing. And of course, I have to thank my bosses here, Brian Zamora, who hired me on 26 years ago, and then eventually gave me the division to run. And Dr. Morrow, our health officer, has been probably the most dedicated health officer I've worked with in the state of California. And more recently, Jean Frazier, who has brought an incredible energy to the health system and incredible energy to my work. It's been very, very thoughtful. And of course, the elected officials throughout San Mateo County, not only the board members I've worked with, but the city council members that have taken the courage to put a lot of these environmental issues onto their political agendas and pushed a lot of issues. It's been very fortunate. Almost to a person, they've been very supportive and allowed me to run a program that has been needed in here. So thanks to all of our combined efforts, our food is safer, hazardous materials, hazardous waste, solid and human contrived waste are better managed, recreational waters are cleaner, our groundwater is cleaner, the Pacific Ocean and the Bay has slightly less plastic in it, but there's a long ways to go. And as we know, the low-hanging fruit keeps getting higher and higher as we go through the career. So I will leave you with a quote. Also, this is also a reminder to me why I was not selected as Poet Laureate for the county. But this is from Dr. Seuss, and it's the Lorax. So unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Thank you.
I like that. President Pine, if I can just, I can't help myself. Just, I mean, our office is really going to miss working with Dean Peterson. If we had an award for favorite client, I mean, Dean would be in the top 3 year after year. I have lawyers that come to my office and say, "Please assign me to Dean Peterson." And so, anyway, Dean, you're fabulous, and you're going to be very much missed.
And I just want to say, Dean, also thank you for helping with the pharmaceutical disposal program 10 years ago. That was quite a feat. And also, you know, you talk about everyone wanting to work with you. I remember one year, one of my staff members. He's no longer here, but he said Dean was voted the coolest manager in our county. And they were right, Dean. Anyway, we're definitely gonna miss you.
Yeah, I would add to that, we will miss you, Dean, and we appreciate the incredible work you've done. But we also really you're a great and fun guy to work with, and for that reason alone, you really shouldn't leave. We enjoy our interactions with you very much, and wish you well. And I'm going to call you about kayaking, if that's okay. Supervisor Groom.
Dean, thank you. When we decided to take on the plastic bags ordinance, it was your creative genius that decided to go to countywide and incorporate all the cities, do a master EIR, and I think without that we never would have been that successful. And it's just very creative, and it was great working with you, and miss you a lot.
Okay.
Supervisor.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Supervisor.
Just a couple things real quick. First of all, Mr. Byers, I thought we were your favorite client.
I said he was in the top 3.
Oh,
So
I noticed that.
So
Your hearing's going out.
it really is. So just as a fellow kayaker, I want to say maybe we can get together sometime and kayak. I don't know if you do ocean kayak or river whitewater, but I know you're an avid kayaker, and that's what you plan to do. And on behalf of my colleagues, we just want to thank you and wish you the very best in your activities. Thank you.
Very good. Our next presentation, Supervisor Groom for Women's History Month.
Thanks very much, President Pine. In 1987, the United States Congress designated March as National Women's History Month in recognition of the myriad roles played by women, as well as their ongoing struggle for genuine equality. For more than 2 decades, San Mateo County has embraced various programs embracing women's talents, skills, while removing cultural and political barriers to women's professional development and advancement. When this county created the Commission on the Status of Women, just 50% of to make sure that over 50% of the population is never ignored. I think in true spirit of San Mateo County, our Commission on the Status of Women has exceeded all expectations, has thousands of accomplishments. Every year comes up with a work plan that I say, gosh, are we really going to be able to get this done? And it's done. So this is part of just recognizing Women's History Month and thanking the many women in our county for years who have served on the commission and those who are currently serving. And so with that, I would like to present to this year's chair, Christine Padilla, a proclamation celebrating Women's History Month, and I would move that we approve this.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Groom. And good morning, President Pine, honorable members of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers. My name is Christine Padilla, and I'm the president of the Commission on the Status of Women. I would like to acknowledge the other members of the commission who are here today, Linda Kelling, Tanisha Hughes, Marguerite Macon, and as well as our commission director, Honora Miller, and our office assistant, Jamie DeBose. Thank you for being here. On behalf of the Commission on the Status of Women, I would like to thank you for proclaiming March as Women's History Month. Proclamations such as these create opportunities to acknowledge the past and present accomplishments of women along with the struggles for equality that have continued to be waged. I would like to take a few brief moments to update you on our work as well as our recent findings in our gender analysis of county boards and commissions. So pardon me as I glance down at our notes for what we've been doing. Our current focus areas are women's political leadership development, including a gender analysis of county boards and commissions, advocacy related to women's criminal justice issues, including programming for the female inmates in the Women's Correctional Center and human trafficking, legislative analysis, our annual women's clothing drive, and recognition of women's accomplishments through the Women's Hall of Fame and Young Women of Excellence Awards. The Commission has been keeping actively informed about the diverse needs of women of all ages in San Mateo County and making recommendations on specific ways to meet those needs since it was established in 1982. The Commission also honors the achievement of women through the Hall of Fame, which is now in our 30th year. Over the past several years, the Commission has focused some energy on encouraging women to become involved politically and has worked collaboratively with local chapter of the nonpartisan statewide organization California Women Lead, which it helped to found in 2002. Since the restructuring of California Women Lead last year, the Commission has been working closely with the newly formed nonprofit called the Women's Community Leadership Network. And we look forward to working together on appointment trainings, policy decisions, and networking opportunities for women throughout the county. The Commission's interest in political involvement led to our ongoing gender analysis of county boards and commissions. Now in its third year, that provides information on the nature of participation by women on county boards and commissions. The Commission is pleased to report that the overall gender mix of county boards and commissions is in line with the general population of the county. While women have a slightly higher rate of membership on county boards and commissions, half of the 6 decision-making boards and commissions have underrepresentation of female members, including the Assessment Appeals Board, the Board of Building Permit Appeals, and Civil Service Commission. So the Commission encourages efforts to expand the outreach for vacancies on all advisory bodies, and particularly those with predominantly male or female members, to increase awareness that offer greater opportunities for participation. This analysis is forthcoming and will be sent to your offices. And we ask that you encourage all county boards and commissions to participate by completing the survey that we put out once a year. For the 5th year, the Commission has conducted a clothing drive for women's work attire with county employees. The clothing is donated to the Career Closet, a nonprofit who assists women entering and re-entering the workforce. And more than 150 county employees participated. So we're very grateful for the county employees' generosity, and they donate gently used and new clothing. So it was very successful for our 5th year. In addition to keeping aware of the needs of the inmates at the Women's Correctional Center and attending jail planning meetings for the Maple Street facility, the Commission has been learning about the growing issue of human trafficking, connecting with organizations that are engaged in local coordinated response, and developing a plan to raise public awareness. As we learn more about the needs of trafficking victims, we will return to you with recommendations. Our commission is once again also collaborating with the Arts Commission during Women's History Month to hold a women's art exhibit here in the Hall of Justice. We hope that you'll take a few moments to walk through the Caldwell Gallery and take a look this month. We have also continued to develop the permanent Women's Hall of Fame exhibit at the San Mateo County History Museum. This has been very exciting for us, and it features 276 honorees in a searchable iPad kiosk exhibit. Hopefully, everyone will take a moment to visit the museum and take a look. There's photos, bios of all of the honorees over the past year, and we're also going to be adding a timeline to provide historical context. And in the future, acceptance speeches will be added, as well as an oral history project. As I wrap up this report, I'd like to take the opportunity to invite each of you and everyone present or viewing this meeting to the 30th Annual Women's Hall of Fame that will be held on Friday, March 21st at 5:30 p.m. at the San Mateo County History Museum, where we will induct Dr. Faye McNair-Knox. She's the Executive Director of One East Palo Alto, Fatima Suarez, Executive Director of Coastside Hope, and high school junior Nina Lua, to our young women of excellence. We are also delighted that Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor will give the keynote speech and will be inducted to the Women's Hall of Fame. So that's very exciting. Tickets can still be purchased on brown paper tickets, and more information is available on our website, csw.cmcgov.org. And we just want to thank the board for your ongoing support of our commission and all of the work we do, and just thank you. And we look forward to your comments and feedback and letting us know how we can further assist you in the county. Thank you very much, and thanks again for the proclamation.
We do have one speaker. Marty Fox would like to mention the Women's Veterans Celebration.
Good morning, President Pine, members of the board, my fellow veterans, Supervisor Slocum and Mr. Maltby, and County Council, Mr. Byers. Thank you for your service to the county. Women's History Month is being celebrated by veterans, too. The 6th annual Women in Military History Ceremony and Luncheon for women serving or who have served in the military takes place at Twin Towers United Methodist Church in Alameda on Saturday, March 15th from noon to 3. San Jose City Council member Rose Herrera is sponsoring a reception, the showing of the When Women Come Marching Home documentary, and a panel discussion at the San Jose City Hall in San Jose on Thursday, March 20th, starting at 6 o'clock. The Team AMVETS Women's Committee is sponsoring the Women Veterans Appreciation Day annual luncheon and program featuring Lieutenant Colonel Animu Loeb as keynote speaker, with the author of Baghdad Yoga, Lieutenant Colonel Michelle Spencer, as a guest speaker at the Ebenezer Lutheran Church on Portola Drive in San Francisco on Saturday, March 22nd from noon to 3. And our own Peninsula Veterans Center is sponsoring an Honoring Women Veterans Contribution to History afternoon tea at the Redwood City Women's Club, 149 Clinton Street in Redwood City on Thursday, March 27th from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. There are more women veterans today than at any time in the history of the United States. It is long past the time to take this time to recognize their service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. And thank you, Supervisor Groom. Our next proclamation concerns Women's View 2014. Supervisor Groom.
Thanks, President Pine. The San Mateo County Arts Commission and the Commission on the Status of Women are very proud to present the Women's View 2014. It's the 10th annual San Mateo County Women's Art Show, and it's right out in the hallway now. It's another wonderful celebration and recognition of the women artists in this county, how talented they are, and I encourage all of you to go and walk through the gallery. Lovely paintings, fair prices. You might be interested in taking one home. But today we're also going to honor this is a juried art show, and so we're going to honor those artists who were awarded special recognition. And our first is to Stephanie Erskine, who painted Iceberg. Our second is to Nancy McDonnell, who painted Women in Bloom. Our third is to Lynn Auld, who painted Foggy Sunrise, Palo Alto. And then we have some honorable mentions, Rose Niponsi, who painted Bird's Eye, Helga Christoph, who painted Hummingbird, and Maureen Grimm, who painted The Mystic Dance. And I think several of you are here today. I also would like to introduce the president of the Arts Commission, Robin Rodericks. So the arts are alive and well in San Mateo County. As we presented about a year ago, we have Robin and her fellow commissioners have really reconstructed the Arts Commission. It's doing fabulous work in the community. Just take a look at the art show out there. You will see the real talented women that we have in San Mateo County. So thank you all very much. Thank you, President Pine.
Yes, thank you. It's great to see the Arts Commission doing all kinds of things for the community, and combined with the poet laureate, we have a lot of good momentum there. It's now my privilege to present a proclamation designating March 14th as Red Cross Month. The Red Cross has a incredibly important mission, which is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. They are first-line responders when tragedy strikes around the world, whether it be floods or fires or hurricanes or typhoons, and we've relied on them, and they've done wonderful work in helping here in our county in connection with, for example, the terrible San Bruno explosion, and more recently the Redwood City fires, where they step in to help with housing and clothing and food. Their blood drives are well known and incredibly successful. They also teach life-saving classes in CPR, aquatic safety, first aid, and provide a very extensive support for our military and veterans. So it is our privilege to recognize them today. I would like to make a motion to proclaim March as American Red Cross Month.
Second.
And a motion, a second, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye. And we have Cindy Holtzman today from the American Red Cross San Mateo County Leadership Council to accept this proclamation and say a few words.
President Pine, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers. My name is Cindy Holzman, and I'm proud to say I've been a Red Cross volunteer for more than 10 years now. Normally, Red Cross Month is a really big thing. This year, it's even more of a big thing in San Mateo County. We haven't, in the past year, sent very many volunteers out to other disasters. We've been just a wee bit busy in San Mateo County, starting in July with the Asiana airline crash, which we responded to. 16 hours later, we responded to a 6-alarm apartment fire in Redwood City. In total, we responded to 40 incidents in San Mateo County last year, providing more than $220,000 worth of assistance to 459 of our residents. And those numbers don't include the Asiana airline crash because that money comes out of a separate pot. We put over 177,000 people through life-saving training, CPR, first aid, water safety, babysitter training, pet first aid, which is available. Thank you. Some of the things that we've also accomplished this year are we have worked with the community college district to sign shelter agreements. We have shelter agreements at all 3 of the colleges now. We have relocated our emergency trailers in 3 different parts of the county, so they're equally available on a moment's notice. And working with our terrific partners at Peninsula Humane Society, they have co-located their emergency trailers with ours, so they can respond to set up a pet shelter if we set up a human shelter. Working with our primary partner, which is the County Human Services Agency, we've put through their employees through personal preparedness instruction and shelter management and shelter training instruction. We're beginning our 2nd round of shelter management instruction in April. So all of the people at HSA are just terrific and step in and work right alongside us whenever we respond. We can't really do it without them. We're very proud of the cooperation that we have with the county, and we stand ready to serve whenever it's needed. Whenever we can assist the county in any time, we're happy to do it. I do need to mention that we have our annual Heroes Breakfast coming up. This year it's May 29th. again at Poplar Creek Grill in San Mateo, which is a gorgeous place to have it. We have a lot of interesting nominees, so it should be a very lively event. You'll be receiving your invitations in the next couple of weeks. We hope you can all clear your calendars and join us, and everybody in the room is welcome to join us too, to celebrate the everyday hero in San Mateo County that steps up to do the right thing just because it's the right thing, not because anybody was asking them to or watching them do it. So again, thank you. We appreciate your support. We appreciate your cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holzman. You are an important partner with the county, and we're glad you're there when it's needed. Our final presentation today will be by Doug Yackel from SFO. I suggested that Doug speak to the board today about some of the work that is being done to improve the runways and what impact that will have on the community during the construction period. As everyone knows, there's a tremendous number of things happening at the airport, from the opening of the beautiful new United terminal, the construction of the new tower, the hotel plans, other terminal modernization plans, record passengers coming through SFO. And at a future meeting, John Martin, the director of the airport, will give us a broader update on the airport. Today's focus will be on the runway improvements and what that means for the community. So if I could ask Doug Yackel to join us. And we appreciate your coming, Doug.
Thank you, President Pine and distinguished board members, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Doug Yackel. I'm the Public Information Officer at SFO Airport, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide a briefing today on a runway safety area construction project that has been underway at the airport since 2008. But we're about to embark on probably the most significant phase and the final phase of this construction project. And it's significant because this final phase will involve the closure of two of our 4 months, beginning in mid-May. So I want to walk you through a little bit about why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and what the effect might be in some of the communities within San Mateo County. It's good to really start with an overview of our runway layout. As you know, SFO has a total of 4 runways. They're made up of 2 parallel intersecting runways, and the way that they're typically used, runways 28 left and right, these are numbered according to their compass heading, and as you know, runways are typically laid out in the direction of prevailing winds. Runways 28 left and right are primarily used for aircraft landing. These would be the aircraft that you typically see coming over the San Mateo Bridge, heading in a northwest direction towards the airport. Those runways have already been completed in terms of the runway safety areas. What's coming up next are these 2 runways, which we call one left and one right. These are primarily used for departing aircraft, which typically launch towards Oakland in the East Bay. So, defined, an RSA is a safety zone surrounding each runway. It's really designed to prevent and to give a greater margin of safety in the event that an aircraft undershoots, overruns, or in some other way exits the regular runway dimensions. It's an additional margin of safety. And I would add that most airports, including SFO, already had runway safety areas. These are simply expanded and improved runway safety areas. This is a federally mandated project. It's required by the FAA that airports complete this work by 2015. This RSA project applies to about 40 of the largest airports in the United States, including our own. It's a federally funded project. As I've mentioned, we've already completed work on our 2 main landing runways, 28 left and 28 right. This final phase is planned for this summer, and obviously this gives us a cushion of time to meet the federal deadline of 2015. In terms of phasing, the FAA gives us several different options in order to comply with this direction. They give us the option to simply increase the raw distance of the thresholds, which is what we've done for runways 28 left and 28 right. This essentially adds 1,000 feet total of additional threshold space on both ends of the runways. The other option that the FAA provides for runways that may be a bit more space constrained, such as one left and one right, is the ability to install what's called an Engineered Material Arresting System, or EMAS. The best analogy I can use is this is very akin to a runaway truck ramp. It's designed to, here's a good picture of an EMAS in use in Charleston, West Virginia. It's made up of a honeycomb material. It's designed to be sturdy enough to accommodate trucks and vehicles, but yet collapse predictably under the weight of an aircraft. So it's really designed to allow an aircraft to sink into it, allow that landing gear to sink into the sandy material safely to bring it to a stop. So the work that's coming up this summer, we're going to be installing this EMAS material on both ends of these runways, one left and one right. We looked at a variety of different options to do these runway closures. We looked at several different phases. We looked at closing one runway at a time. We looked at shortening the usable length of the runway and operating departing flights over an active construction area. And we did this in consultation with both the FAA's air traffic controllers and the airlines that operate at SFO, presented a variety of different options. In terms of phasing and in terms of using only one runway at a time or using a shortened runway, we didn't view this as, number one, a good safe option for us, and the reality was not all aircraft could continue to use those runways. So the option that we selected in consultation with the air traffic controllers and the airlines was to close both runways simultaneously, install these EMAS systems in both at the same time. This requires about 4.5 months to complete this work, and this will essentially divert all traffic onto runways 28 left and 28 right. So we would be operating all arrivals and all departures on those two runways. The thing we like about this from a safety perspective is this uses air traffic control procedures that our FAA folks are familiar with, so it's an improved margin for safety. As I mentioned, this dual runway closure option gets the work done in the shortest amount of time. We've already done a lot of lead-up construction work to help facilitate this. The official closure is slated to begin on May 17th. Our plan is to run this through the month of September. We do have provisions in place to allow this work to get completed earlier if possible, but we're forecasting about 4 to 4.5 months to get it done. This work will happen 24/7. Crews are going to be working around the clock. The reason we chose this window of time, this May to September window of time, is because although we do get some of that June gloom and some of the foggy conditions, statistically it is the driest period of time at the airport. And because we're going to be doing paving and we need asphalt and other materials to cure, this was really what drove the selection process. I want to talk a little bit about the impact that this could have on delays and what we're doing to mitigate that. In a current clear weather arrival rate, on a day like today, great weather, our peak demand periods throughout the day require that we land about 52 to 54 aircraft per hour. During the period of May 17th through September, when we close our two departing runways, our anticipated arrival rate is going to be curtailed slightly to about 45 to 46 flights per hour. So during peak demand periods, we may experience some delays, and those peak demand periods typically are 11 to noon, 6 to 7, and 8 to 9 p.m., and those are really periods of peak arrival demand. What we're also working on is mitigating any type of departure delays that we may see due to increased taxi traffic. So that's the potential operational impact. Now, we've been working, as I mentioned, for several years now on these phasing options, working with airlines and the FAA. The FAA has already provided a review of summer 2014 flight schedules and provided comment to the airlines. And the goal here was really to minimize any flight schedule increases during the peak periods this summer so as not to exacerbate some of these capacity issues that we're going to be experiencing. We've also been benchmarking a little bit. We're not the only airport in the country with runway constraints, and we've certainly been reaching out to some of our colleagues. We made a visit to JFK Airport, which had a similar runway closure in 2010. And a system that JFK used to great success is called a DMS, or a Departure Management System. JFK has had a long-standing issue with taxiing aircraft, waiting a long time, waiting for its takeoff slot. This DMS has been implemented successfully in JFK to help reduce departing aircraft wait times during taxi. And we've procured this system. We're going to use the same system this summer during our runway closures. In addition, last fall we implemented a new FAA arrival procedure called CASPER. Really like the acronyms. That's the Closely Spaced Parallel Runway System. This essentially allows more efficient use of our 2 arriving runways, so this will also help our capacity issues during this period of closure. I want to talk a little bit about the effect that this will have on the flight patterns and show you a little bit of a map in terms of how aircraft typically depart. So today, here's a look at our current departure patterns using those runways, one left and one right. Typically what you have is flights that are going to the Midwest, East Coast, or Europe will launch off the ones, they'll head up the bay and head in an easterly direction towards their destinations. Aircraft that are departing for Southern California, which is by and large our single greatest market in terms of frequency of flights, also take off using the ones. They make a left turn typically around the Brisbane area, head south down the peninsula towards Southern California. And then today we typically use 28 left and 28 right for some departures. These are usually large international departures going to Asia, maybe domestic flights going to Hawaii. This is a typical pattern today. When we close runways one left and one right, what you'll see is a different disbursement. You'll see Asia and Hawaii traffic continue to depart through the San Bruno Gap, but what you'll also have is aircraft going to Southern California launching off the San Bruno Gap. So cities like South San Francisco, San Bruno, north end of Pacifica, south end of Daly City may see an increase in that Southern California traffic. It's important to note that these are the smallest aircraft. These are also the quietest aircraft in terms of traffic. We will also see that Midwest and East Coast traffic and European traffic depart off 28 left and 28 right, making a right turn prior to Highway 101. We call this a shoreline departure, and heading to their destination. We've already reached out to the airlines to talk about the importance of adhering to these departure patterns strictly. A good question that typically comes up is the fact that, with only 4 runways, what the effect is on closing 2 of our 4 runways and operating using only those 2 runways. And a good question is, well, has it ever been done before? And the answer is we do it all the time. In reality, we actually use only runways 28 left and 28 right based on wind conditions quite frequently. We took a look at last year's operations, and in reality, over 100 days last year, we operated using strictly 28 left and 28 right. So it's not a new procedure for us. What's different is we're going to be doing it 24 hours a day. So that is a change for us. But what's important from an FAA safety perspective is this is a procedure that's familiar to our air traffic controllers. I want to talk a little bit about evening operations. This is another look at the departure patterns that we're typically going to experience during the runway closures. It's important to note kind of how these schedules dissipate as we get into the evening hours. Typically, Southern California traffic begins to wind down around 9 p.m. You really don't see any flights going to Southern California after that. There are a handful of flights going to Asia later in the evening, but typically we see those destinations begin to wind down earlier. What remains are what we call the red-eye departures. These are the transcontinental flights going from the West Coast to cities like New York, Boston, and Washington. And those typically operate after the 10 o'clock hour. And that's why it's important for us, and we've been working with the airlines to keep this traffic east of Highway 101 for community impact. Our goals for the RSA program are really to enhance our safety culture, to comply with federal regulations, and to acknowledge the fact that SFO is unique in that we have a very limited footprint. We really don't have room to grow. We can't extend runway safety areas out into the bay. So we really have to find solutions within our existing footprint, and we feel that this plan will do that. We've got a variety of information that's available. We've got a special page set up on our website. It's got an animated video that talks about the project and how we came to this plan, what it looks like. We've also got flight tracking information and further materials on the RSA project. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Questions?
I just had one. So if a lot of the flights I noticed will be going over Daly City, and that's an area where I live, although I live in the northern part, and we do get complaints. I do get complaints from Daly City occasionally on this. If people do have issues with this, if it isn't quite, as you say, getting quiet after 9 o'clock and things like that, is there somewhere people can call?
Absolutely, and I'll furnish this information. We've got a noise abatement office which is staffed to manage any community concerns regarding our noise issues. They've certainly been very instrumental in helping reach out to the communities to provide this advisement. We've also been visiting with the city councils of the affected cities to provide this information, and really our goal is to heighten awareness. In about a week's time, we're also going to do a media event. We're going to invite all the local media outlets to the airport, provide a tour of the facility, and provide an overview of the project. And really our goal is to heighten awareness here. So, but yes, we're going to have our noise abatement staff ready to assist.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, we've spoken, of course, Doug, about this on a couple occasions, and the more outreach, the better. In that, people know what's happening, and they can accept it. But when they're surprised, it's more difficult. And could you speak in a little more detail about some of the outreach, like in particular, have you considered doing some kind of mailing or some kind of direct communication, because it's not easy to reach people today, and anything we can do to give people a heads up this is coming will make that 4 months easier on everyone.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that feedback. We've been employing a variety of strategies. We've issued press releases. We have been making visits to all of the local communities affected by flight pattern changes. We're also reaching out in the business community, AAAE, SAMCETA, other Bay Area business forums. We've been reaching out to try and heighten awareness. We're hoping that the Media Day helps achieve some local news coverage, but we're certainly open to any option that we feel will raise awareness. If we get accused of over-communicating on this one, I'd be happy with that. So appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, I would say those things are good, and maybe we can talk later about maybe some direct outreach. A postcard to the people in the Gap would not be terribly expensive, and you could give them links to. It's hitting community groups and such is important, but it doesn't percolate down that far. So any event, other questions or comments?
I just might suggest that you might also contact city councils, both probably Pacific as well as
they
New York
have been
City.
doing that. Yeah.
They actually made a similar presentation to councils.
You can elaborate, Doug.
Yeah, so we've made city council presentations in Pacifica, Daly City, South San Francisco, Brisbane, and we've got San Bruno scheduled. So we want to get on those calendars. Yeah, absolutely.
I might suggest also, I think all of those cities have their own TV, the Channel 26. It might be helpful to have some information where people can contact and get more information from you, because people do look at those.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So that's, and that's sort of free press.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, we appreciate the presentation, and we'll do all we can to get the word out.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now moved to matters set for a specified time. I guess my recommendation is that we take this item and then take a brief break. So let's go with the hearing on the. This has a succinct way to describe this. Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act regarding bonds for the mobile home project.
Thank you, Mr. President. The board knows the drill on these TEFRA financings, so I will be brief in laying this out for you today. As the board is aware, the Independent Cities Finance Authority is a joint powers authority, or JPA, among which San Mateo County is a member. This JPA was created for the purposes of raising capital or financing for certain qualified projects that benefit its members' local community. Here, in this matter before you today, the JPA desires to issue bonds in the amount of $34 million for the purposes of refunding certain revenue bonds previously issued by the JPA, the sale proceeds of which are loaned then to Coach of San Diego, Inc., which is a nonprofit. Coach of San Diego, Inc. will then use the money to finance the acquisition and renovation of a 227-unit mobile home park known as Pillar Ridge, which is located in Moss Beach. Coach of San Diego would like the JPA to act as the issuer of the bonds. In order for the bonds to qualify as tax exempt under IRS rules, two things must happen. First, the JPA members within whose jurisdiction the project is cited, of course that's San Mateo County in this case, must hold a TEFRA hearing. And second, the same board must adopt a resolution approving the issuance of the bonds. So to that end, I respectfully request that you open the public hearing and then close the public hearing and then consider the resolution before you today. Thank you.
Thank you. We will then open the public hearing on this matter. I don't believe anyone wants to speak, so well, you can certainly speak, Supervisor Horsley.
Thank you, President Pine.
Anytime.
Let me just say that this is well, it's obviously pretty close to Princeton. It's in Moss Beach. And so I want to thank the County Council for actually moving this along. This is a mobile or manufactured home community for low-income people on the coast side, and it's been in existence for some period of time. And this, the issuance of these these bonds actually are done at this time because they're actually very favorable interest rates for these homeowners. And just want to point out that we read about these kind of manufactured home areas being threatened by developers to develop larger, more I guess expensive residences. We've seen this in a number of communities, and this is one that the San Mateo County has been able to work with and preserve. And I want to point out that two of my former colleagues really were responsible for getting us this as a low-income mobile home park for a whole, well, that 227 spaces. It was actually my predecessor, Rich Gordon, and one of the prime movers was the late Mike Nevin, who really cared about people, and this is was important to him. It's certainly important, obviously, to the residents here. So I'm really in favor of moving this recommendation.
Thanks for those comments. Any other comments before we close the public hearing?
No, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so the public hearing is closed.
I'll move the resolution.
And I'll second it.
Motion moved and seconded. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
That is approved. So we'll take a 5-minute break and reconvene.
Hey, Warren.
And that's the place right behind the airport. Okay, the Board of Supervisors meeting is reconvening, and the next agenda item concerns the Alpine Road Trail Improvement Projects, and Mr. Porter from Public Works will present.
We have a brief but informative presentation for you today, and following the presentation, I'd be happy to answer questions. So staff was before you in late January to talk about certifying the initial study mitigated negative declaration for the trail improvement project along Alpine Road in the unincorporated county area. When we left that meeting, the board directed us to do two things. One was to continue working with the permitting agencies to get permits on the current design, and the other was to meet with Stanford to evaluate alternate approaches to remediating crankbank erosion excuse me, at two of the sites along the project length, and we've been doing that. In terms of the first direction, we have been speaking with the permitting agencies. California Fish and Wildlife and the Corps of Engineers have confirmed that they've received those permits, and we're expecting a response from them within 60 days, hopefully positive, but with some of the permitting agencies, it's hard to tell what we're going to get in terms of a response. We also have a field meeting scheduled next week with other permitting agencies to talk about our project. In terms of the second approach, which was meeting with Stanford, we've met several times, 3 times in the office and 1 out in the field to look at essentially haul routes if we were to follow the alternate approach. And what that alternate approach was at the meeting in January, Stanford suggested that we look at a softer biotechnical approach to the creek bank stabilization improvements. And I'll explain what that means in a second. So to summarize the meetings, Stanford has offered to allow the county to use their land for accessing the site, excuse me, realigning the creek, and staging our equipment to get in and out. So in order for us to do the Portola Valley approach or option, we would need to be able to access it from the Stanford side, and they've graciously agreed to allow that. What we have found in our site visit is that we have some constraints in an access route, particularly at Site 3, that's a bit more challenging than what Portola Valley faced. And finally, we did speak with Stanford about financial assistance to help us out in terms of funding for the creek realignment. And in those meetings, Stanford was not able to offer that financial assistance. So Portola Valley, what did they do? Portola Valley came in and they did a combination stitch pier wall design, which I'll talk about in a second, and a bioremediation approach. In the case of Portola Valley, the creek was further away from the trail that they were working near. So they had a little bit more room to work, but they were able to access that site through existing access roads in Santa Clara County. And the map that you see or the picture below shows that access route. It was fairly straightforward. There's existing roads there. Of course, everything's a challenge getting in near a creek, but there was a little bit of an easier access than what I will show you later. This is their design. To the left, that black line is the stitch pier wall. And what those are is essentially columns that are drilled into the ground at about a 3 to 4 foot spacing. And they use essentially the weight of the soil pushing against them to compress that soil to hold it up. As you get near the creek, you'll see what's called a timber crib wall. And it's basically big pieces of timber tied together like a crib. That's why they call it a crib wall. And using that to help support the slope, but also to provide erosion protection when the creek does get higher during the winter periods. They also did some work in the creek.
That's a quick question. That stitch pier wall, is that like a big solid concrete thing, or what?
It's like a big solid concrete pier that's put into the ground, underground actually. And they're, in the case of La Honda, I'm not sure what they did on this one, but we tied the top of that together. But there is gaps between those stitch piers. So when the soil pushes against it, the soil compresses against that wall and holds the road up. Okay. That's how it's designed.
Is it just a pier, or is it like a soldier beam, or is it just a concrete pier?
It's a concrete pier, I know. I'm not familiar with their exact design, but I can tell you in La Honda, where we used this for that repair, we had a steel cage that was put together for steel reinforcing, and then it was cast in place, the pier. So that's what Portola Valley did. I apologize for the shadows in these pictures, but you get a sense on the left side for what Portola Valley accomplished. And you can see right at the edge of the darkness and the light, you'll see that wooden stitch pier wall. So if you look to the right, that's our county site number 2, which is on the Portola Valley side of I-280. As you can tell, the creek is much closer to the road than what we're seeing in Portola Valley. This is essentially a cross-section across our site 2, which shows where the creek is. It's fairly close to the road, as well as a side channel a bit to the right. So this gives you an idea of what the existing conditions look like there. So what we asked our consultant to do was go out and take the concepts of the Portola Valley design and implement that at our sites 2 and 3. What this photo shows you, or this plan, or it's a profile actually, shows you is how we would overlay the wooden crib wall design over our design. So to the left, you'll see what our proposal is, which is the soldier pile wall. And the reason that's there is to give you kind of some concept as to where our wall would be. And that dotted line is existing grade, the dashed line, where our wall would be relative to where the Portola Valley design would go. So basically, we're not sure if that wall would need to be there or not. That would need to be engineered to see what sort of structural reinforcement would be required to hold up the trail and the road. May be required, may not. We really don't know until we get into design. But you'll see that what we would do is put in the timber crib wall solution out from where the road is. We would essentially excavate out a location to the right side of the photo and use that soil to backfill behind that wall. Excuse me, that backfill will provide some structural support, but we won't know again whether we'll need a structural solution until that's thoroughly engineered. Site 3 is where the fun starts. That's the tough site that's on the Menlo Park side of I-280. That site is much steeper, and the creek is very close to the side of the road. That left photo again is the Portola Valley photo, and the right photo is our Site 3. This is the existing profile, the surveyed condition next to the road. You'll see the creek is fairly close to the road. And this is what the solution could look like for the Portola Valley solution. Again, we've shown the cast-in-place concrete wall to the left for reference only. We're not sure what sort of structural solution, if any, is necessary there. On this location, the engineer in me says we're probably going to have some sort of wall. Not quite sure what that is, but it likely wouldn't be to the extent of the wall that we're proposing. So again, we shift the creek over. We put in the timber crib wall. We excavate out to develop a new creek alignment, use that material to backfill behind that crib wall, and that's how that solution goes into place. Excuse me. So if we were to pursue that option, we also asked our engineering firm as well as our environmental consultant what that might mean in terms of time. You'll see kind of a bar schedule later, but we will have to go through some re-engineering. We've got to do survey work, some hydraulic analysis, and a preliminary design as to what these improvements might look like. We would also get into the more detailed design where our consultants, BKF, would retain a sub-consultant that specializes in this type of work to actually do the hydraulic analysis and design the bioremediation aspects of the project. We would go out and we would update the ISM&D and recirculate that and go through the comment process again. And then in this case, as well as our other case, we're going to have some post-construction monitoring. And the reason is when we go in and do these projects, we will be destroying some habitat. We will be going in and doing some damage. So part of the mitigation is to replant and make sure that when you replant it, that the vegetation takes over again. So you have to monitor that, and we'll need to do that. We'll also have to enter into an access agreement or some easement documents with Stanford that both allows us to construct these improvements, but also allows us to get in there to do the post-construction monitoring. This is a slide that compares the schedules between what we had originally proposed and what we are proposing, or what could occur under the what we'll call the Portola Valley design. Basically what it does is it pushes out our project to late 2015 construction or possibly 2016. And I'll note that our original intent was to construct this year. That, of course, is subject to us getting permits from all the permitting agencies. We're now in mid-March, and we haven't received those permits. So regardless of which design we go with, there is a real possibility that, given this late date, we will not be issued permits to construct this year. Knowing that, we plan on issuing a letter to the utility companies that are along Alpine Road. You've heard a lot about the gas main and the water main. We're going to advise those utilities of a possible delay in the project and let them know that they may need to take measures to protect their utilities through at least one winter and maybe two. And it's really a cautionary note for the utilities, but we want to make sure that they understand that there's a possibility we're not going to get in there this year or potentially next year. In terms of the environmental process, I'll go over this very quickly because we've already talked about it, but we'll need to go through the ISM&D process again. Basically amend the current document, but go through the recirculation and commenting period. We need to amend the permits, and again, we'll be looking at creek monitoring of the new improvements. Challenges. So particularly Site 3 is of concern to us because there are really two reasons. If you go out there and look at the creek, there's bends in the creek, and there's been discussion about us putting a wall up at Site 3 and increasing the velocity of the creek. If we were to realign the creek on a straighter alignment, the length that the water travels will actually be decreased, and that will have the potential of increasing velocity in that segment of the creek. Now, that's not something that is a deal breaker because we can engineer energy dissipation within that section of the creek to slow down the water. But it's just another thing that you got to think about when you do these kinds of projects. The other big issue for us is access to Site 3. And this shows you a bit of how that access would occur. And again, Stanford has graciously allowed us to use their land. We would be constructing an access road. We're using existing facilities, but also constructing an access road in the area where hikers and bikers typically access the Stanford Dish. We would be running our equipment through that area across some pretty open area that has some oak trees there. We don't anticipate taking any of those trees out. It gets a little more complex when we get nearer to that site. And this shows some pictures of how we're going to get there. As you can see, it's fairly open as you move from the Stanford Dish entrance location towards our site. But as you move in a little closer, you have more brush. Now, some of these trees can be trimmed. Some of them need to be removed, but you need to be aware of that as you move forward. And you'll see, you got to really look, but on the left-hand photo, there's a dusty-footed wood rat nest, which are quite prevalent out there. It's a protected species, and it will just need to be relocated or otherwise avoided when we get through there.
Where's that nest, Jim?
So if you look to the stand of trees to your right in the left-hand side photo, if you follow those trees down, there's a little kind of bump, a dark-looking bump about mid-photo. That is a dusty-footed wood rat nest. Dusky? I always get that wrong. It's a dusky-footed wood rat nest that would need to be addressed because those are protected. When you get closer to the site, that's where we get in a little more challenge. There are some larger trees in that area. So we'll be taking out some trees, but we will be running fairly big equipment out there. We're going to have excavators and trucks, and those are heavy pieces of equipment. So as you can imagine, we'll be creating quite a bit of disturbance. That disturbance can be remediated. So when you look at that, you think about construction. Construction is kind of messy, but you go in and you do your construction, you come back, you remediate it. So none of this is a deal breaker, as I mentioned. In terms of cost, we talked to our consultants, and these are very rough estimates about those costs. So if you recall in the previous slide, Portola Valley's project for construction alone was about $360,000 for their site. That included the stitch pier wall. If you just kind of take a wild guess, you would think if we're doing that twice, it would be about double that cost. So that's roughly $720,000 there. There will be added costs to access the site, develop staging areas, and do other ancillary construction type things, as well as some walls that may or may not be expensive. That hasn't been designed yet. But I think the bottom line is we'll likely see a doubling of the cost of this project. Now, some people will argue that these estimates are too conservative. I know in our discussions with the consultant, they've told us they're very conservative because they didn't have a lot of information. So this is probably the higher end of what it'll cost. It might be less. And looking at our project, we're saying that the walls for us to construct are somewhere around $320,000. That could be right. It could be low. I mean, it really depends on the bid you receive. But you get a sense that we feel that it's probably an order of magnitude more expensive to do the Stanford approach or the Portola Valley approach than what we're doing right now. And that concludes my presentation. I think really to summarize, we're in a place now where we feel that we have a project that met the board's original direction and was as least intrusive as possible as we could design within our right-of-way. You know, we got to the board in January, and Stanford mentioned that they had land for us to use, which we didn't really have as an option when we started this out. So now a new option's presented itself, and I think environmentally, it's an interesting option to pursue. It's a good option. I think the question is, you know, cost and time. So I can't guarantee we'll get our project done this year. I can't guarantee that we can get our project done next year. I likely think it'll get done next year. The Stanford project or the Portola Valley project could go next year, or it could go in 2016. But the key is, if we change course, there's going to be added time because we have to redesign and go through the whole process again. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions that you might have.
Questions for Mr. Porter? I think we'll have some other speakers, but let's ask Mr. Porter questions while he's here.
Yes, Jim, just out of curiosity, you mentioned and it was mentioned also in the letter that the Stanford has not offered any funding, but it didn't say that they wouldn't offer funding from the way it reads in here, or have they completely indicated they wouldn't be willing to fund at all?
Through the president, no, they haven't. We have Stanford representatives here. In our meetings, they could not commit to funding. That was not, to me, a total no, but I think it'd probably be better to hear from Stanford on their opinions there.
Okay, maybe we'll wait till we have the speakers and do that. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I had one question for Mr. Porter. If we weren't able to do anything this summer, which may be the case even under the current proposal, you know, we have a winter coming up in 14-15, and there's some talk of El Nino conditions. And you showed us the pictures of, you know, the substantial erosion in two sites. How would that fare in an El Nino condition, and what would there have to be temporary emergency measures taken, or would it? I know it's probably a hard thing to predict, but we would under any scenario. I believe it's highly likely we're not going to be constructing this summer under any scenario, and so we got a big winter coming up next year.
Mm-hmm. President Pine, I will tell you, I've been with the county almost 7 years now, and that location has been looked at and monitored over those 7 years. You can see, though, that most recently, I'd say within the last 3 to 5 years, the fence that is now hanging in air wasn't hanging in air a few years ago. So there is some erosion cutting back. I think we've had 3 dry winters. This is the 3rd dry winter that we're going through. So, you know, luckily this bank hasn't really been subjected to a very large storm. If it does, you know, it's hard to predict what will happen. I think what we want to do, though, is make sure that the utilities are notified of our schedule, because really what concerns me here is not necessarily the road section. We have the location of Site 3 is where it's essentially a merge lane, joins into the travel lane. So it's about 2 lanes wide. If we lose 5 or 10 feet of that road, we're not going to have to close Alpine Road. But if we lose 5 or 10 feet of that road, there's a PG&E gas line there, and there's a Cal water line, and the Cal water line is fairly substantial.
And those lines are, if I'm looking at the County Site 3 photograph, they're kind of underneath the road a little bit. Is that where they are?
Well,
There's not much. The road. Maybe you could help me understand where those lines are a little bit better.
So, and President Pine, I can't tell you exactly where those are, and I don't have a good picture. I think that the gas line and the water line are fairly close to the shoulder of the road. But again, I think we've asked the utilities to go out and mark those so we have exact locations. And I'd also like to let you know, we talked with Parsons Brinkerhoff, which is a internationally recognized firm, about how we would deal with these utilities during construction. Parsons Brinkerhoff has offered a couple of suggestions. With the water line, it's a 24-inch concrete pipe. That's a huge amount of water that's going through that line. 2 things can happen, or there's 3 options, really. The water line can be relocated during construction. That doesn't sound very practical, honestly. The second option is Cal Water, or the project, probably Cal Water, would come in with essentially lagging or
sheet pile. I'm sorry, sheet pile. You drill sheet pile by the water line to support it while we dig out from behind it. Or this wall is fairly long. You construct the wall in segments so that you're holding up a great deal of the pipe as you move along. That's not recommended because it's going to take longer to do that and it's going to get more expensive. So probably some sort of sheet piles is the solution. PG&E, they really need to decide what they're going to do about this. A couple of options there. Again, they can relocate the gas line. They can cap the gas line on each side of this. I don't know what their gas network looks like. I know with water systems, they're redundant. They have loops, so you can cut off segments and still serve the public. Again, that's up to PG&E. Or it can be supported through sheet piling, or again, we would look at kind of a staging or segmenting of that wall. Those decisions really need to be left with those utilities. They know their pipes the best, and we would work with them whatever happens, because depending on what approach the board chooses for us to pursue, we're going to be digging up that slope. We're going to have to.
Yeah.
So we will be working with those utilities as we move forward, whichever way we go.
Supervisor Groom?
Mr. Porter, have you had any time at all to look into state or federal funding through, in some sort of bonds or environmental funds that are available through the state or feds?
Through the president, we have not looked at that specifically on this project. I can tell you that funding for this type of work is very limited. The one time we do see funding is in a declared emergency. Unfortunately, it's kind of too late then, and the reimbursement is about 75%. We can certainly look into that and report back to your board, but I'm not aware of any sources at this time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Supervisor Horsley?
Just have one question on the PG&E's gas line. We've had there are lots of replacement of these gas lines, and especially because of the age and some of the problems, the obvious problems that some of them have had. Do we know, or do you know, have you talked to them? I assume you have talked to them about the age of that pipeline. Will either of these projects affect their ability to either replace or inspect those gas lines?
Through the president, I've seen emails that say that the line out there was installed in the early 1990s. I don't know that's one that they're going to replace. The replacement program that I'm familiar with is the larger diameter transmission main, similar to what was in San Bruno that were constructed in the 50s. We again can follow up on that, but I'm not aware of any plans to replace the line in Alpine Road that would be affected by our project.
Is it a line big enough where they could send those, I guess it's called a pig, through the line to inspect it? Or is that how they inspect that line, or is it too small, or?
The use of pigs that I'm familiar with are in lines larger, like the 22-inch diameter to the 34-inch diameter. I don't know if they have that kind of technology on a smaller line.
Any further questions?
Just one quick. Mr. Porter, I know you were kind enough to take me out to the creek and we toured and walked up and down the Alpine Road there, but I can't remember, did the Portola Valley, did they bring in heavy equipment, or was that just a much simpler project?
Through the president, they did bring in heavy equipment, and this picture shows the haul route or the access route that they took. So there's existing roads out there that'll get you to the Portola Valley site fairly easily. Our Site 3 is the one that concerns us a little more. I call it pioneering a road, but we're going to have to cut through some of that wilderness and brush to get to our Site 3.
That's in the alternative approach.
In the alternative approach, correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Mr. Porter? I don't have speaker cards, but I do think some people do want to speak. Do you have cards, Becky? Oh, are there speakers? I'm sorry, maybe I misplaced them. My apologies. Okay. Jerry Hearn?
Excuse me. Good morning, President Pine, members of the board. My name is Jerry Hearn. I live at 144 El Nido Road in Portola Valley, actually in Los Trancos Woods, which is part of the county. And for those of you, I know some of you, for those of you I don't know, a brief introduction. I consider myself a watershed enthusiast. I've been working on issues in this watershed for over 25 years. And currently I co-chair the Searsville Advisory Group, a group put together by Stanford to get public input into the process of what they're going to do with Stanford. So and I have, for many years, I've been watching this site and watching as it slowly erodes. And a number of times I brought it up, and I'm glad to see that something's finally going to be done here. This morning, I'd like to speak in support of the considerations that Stanford has lined out yesterday in their letter to the board. I want to begin by actually expressing my thanks. I wasn't here at the January meeting. I want to express my thanks to the board for directing staff to engage with Stanford University to consider the possibilities for a more creek-friendly solution to this problem. I understand the challenges that this poses to the Public Works Department, who are working hard to complete the project, and they have funding and time restrictions on them. As some of you know, I'm involved with pretty deeply with the downstream project by the JPA, and we're running into some of the same problems. So I can put myself on the other, not the other side, but the side of the people who are trying to do the planning for the county. That being said, I want to just let you know that I'm not trying to be a hindrance to this project. I'm actually just bringing what I always bring to these kind of projects, which is a lens that's looking at it in the best interests of the creek inhabitants. I want to point out that the willingness of the university to engage in this process should not be taken lightly. Can I go over, or do I need?
A few more. If you could wrap up.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Seconds.
So I want to apply. I didn't realize it was only 2 minutes. I thought it was 3. I want to applaud Stanford for coming forward. It's highly unusual for a private landowner to offer up land for a public purpose like this. Now, I realize that deciding on this project is going to be kind of difficult because of what Mr. Porter laid out in terms of time and money. But again, in closing, I strongly encourage you to continue working with Stanford to try to determine not a better, but a more creek-friendly solution for this. So thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'm open to answering them.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. Janet Davis.
Just as an aside, the fence didn't fall in because of erosion. It fell in because cars keep crashing through it. The problem is the way that the county has planned their storm drains. That's what's causing the erosion. And if you do what is suggested, all you're going to do is exacerbate the problem. You can't just wall one side of a creek. It's going to have a huge impact on the people downstream and on Stanford's property. And I think it's to Stanford's credit that they have offered to be involved in this. They're not always cooperative, in my view, but this time they really are absolutely wonderful. The Regional Water Board came on a guided tour that I took them along the creek with some other state and federal people. And they were absolutely shocked at what the county has allowed to become built along the creek. And if the county is so concerned about erosion, why do they permit the construction to the edge of the bank and beyond? And a better thing to be concerned about is the damage to the sewer line caused by all of this construction and storm drains. And as to the trail, they've planned to do some construction at the Bishop Lane turn, where there are numerous PG&E pipes and water pipes right where they plan to excavate and put in concrete. And there are also other alternatives. There's a big median by the 280 freeway, and you could move the road over a little bit. And I don't think that it's appropriate to talk about removing brush and removing endangered animals' habitats by bulldozing or putting in trails there. I've forgotten what I was going to say, but I'm totally against this proposal. I think it's idiotic. Thank you.
Okay, and our final speaker, unless there's the final card I have, is with Lenny Roberts.
Morning, President Pine and members of the board. I'm Lenny Roberts, speaking for Committee for Green Foothills, and I would like to enthusiastically support Jerry Hearn's comments. I too have been very involved in creek issues on this creek for 25 years, and I'm resident of the watershed as well. I think I know this is kind of a difficult issue to balance all these competing concerns, but we need to start taking better care of all of our creeks. We have not crossed the threshold of real acceptance of the importance of the creeks unless we do that. So I would just leave you with the thought that my wise mother used to always say to me, and that is, take the time to do it right. And I think that would be what I would like to see you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Are there any other speakers at Stanford? Do you have any comments? Oh, we do have your letter.
Yeah, and we're available for questions.
Okay. Then turn back to the board for discussion.
I guess one question I would have for Mr. Porter, if we don't certify this today and we get into looking at the other design and going through the same permit process, what happens if that permit process doesn't play out that those agencies will allow us to do? I guess we don't really know if they're going to allow us to do this anyway. So we're sort of in that wait and see no matter what we do. Do you feel we have a greater likelihood in the Stanford design, I call it Stanford design, but the Alpine design versus this design with the agencies, or do you think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other?
Through the president, it's very hard for me. That's it.
Brilliant.
It's very hard for me to judge what the permitting agencies will do in this case. I know that based on my experience with San Francisco Creek and the comments that project has received from permitting agencies, they are definitely leaning towards a more soft approach. That being said, we have somewhat specific and unique challenges here with those utilities. So, I mean, a combination is what this project is likely going to be is some form of structural support for those utilities along the road. Whether we pursue the Portola Valley design either with this project or in a subsequent project, that is something I'm not quite sure how the agencies would look at. But we're going to meet with them next week and get some more comments from them. So it's kind of a long answer to I'm really not sure, but they're tending to lean towards these softer designs.
Okay, I guess it would have been nice to know that going in. I mean, some agencies are, if we had a better sense that they, we can go through this whole process on what we have here and have it not be accepted, or even have them eyeball the softer design and give us a better sense so that we don't spend, chase our tails a little bit if they're not going to go for that one.
Certainly, and if I can respond through the president, the information that we've got on San Francisco Creek was just made available to us last week. When we started this project a year ago, we fully believed, and we still believe, that this project is permittable. When we saw that letter last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, from the Regional Water Quality Control Board, I think not only the County of San Mateo, but several agencies have been very concerned about what the regional board, the direction they're starting to take. Not necessarily with the software improvements, but some of the other mitigation efforts that they're requiring in these projects. So I understand what you're saying, and I wish we could turn the clock back. But I think based on what we know today, the regional board tends to lean that way.
Thank you.
Other comments?
So with the regional water board's comments, I guess we don't really know if the project that you propose is really permittable. And do we know that the other Stanford project is more permittable, or do we know how does Los Trancas Creek affect San Francisco Creek? Does it change the volume, the speed, the potential of further erosion and damage downstream?
So through the president, the volume of water doesn't change. The speed can change. That can be mitigated through energy dissipation within the design of what we're doing. in terms of the agencies, I really cannot provide a whole lot of insight as to how they're going to look at this. I can tell you I just saw an email that we've sent to the various permitting agencies for a culvert repair job on the coast where we applied for a permit in 2010. And we're still awaiting approval on that. And in fact, the reason why this email train is going through is that it's been so long, the culvert we were trying to repair is entirely collapsed. So we have to go in and do emergency work to fix that. So I'm not very confident in which way the agencies might go on this, or whether they'll act at all in a timely manner.
I have to say, to be honest, I really don't know which way to go on this one. I'd like to get it done because it's been hanging around for a long time. I'd like to get that. I know some people don't call it a trail, whatever, a path or whatever. I'm concerned about the public safety issues about the utilities, but I just frankly don't know which is really a better option. If they, one obviously is a lot more expensive than the other, but it looks like environmentally it's a superior project. On the other hand, it delays the whole process. On the other hand, so looking at it again, I guess the utility companies, they can take some mitigation measures to protect those utilities in the meantime, no matter what we do. So, I think I'm kind of leaning towards doing more study on the Stanford project than I am towards the recommended the other original project.
Supervisor Groom.
I'm ready to go to the Stanford alternative. I think that when I served, I learned a little bit more about creeks and watersheds when I served on the San Francisco board, and I've been up and looked at this several times. I think that if we do the first project that we all thought was the right thing to do about a year ago, we don't get the desired results that the second alternative allows us to do. And if we did the first alternative, we could come back, some board would have to come back maybe down the road and do the work that could be done now under the Stanford alternative, and it could possibly end up costing us a whole lot more money. So I'm ready to take the plunge and say that the alternative is what we should do, and we should start continue working with Stanford, start going through the design, start looking for additional funding, and just make this our goal to get it done well, but get it done in the right way, but as quickly as we can, even if it is 16 or 17, because I think in the long run it will last and it will hold up and it will meet all of our needs that we've been talking about.
Supervisor Slocum.
Just a couple things. When you use the term softer approach earlier, is that the Portola Valley, their solution?
Yes, through the president. I was referring to the wooden crib wall approach. It was more of the biotechnical approach rather than our structural approach.
And then, thank you. Secondly, is there any way to do like an analysis with modeling downstream to get back to Supervisor Horsley's question about the impact on the San Francisco Creek with these alternatives?
Well, we'll be, through the president, we'll be required to remodel everything as part of this new design.
Right.
If you would like to extend that model further downstream, we can talk to our consultants about this. Certainly.
I don't know. I'm only an alternate on the San Francisco Creek board, but that might be of interest. I'd let Supervisor Pine speak to that. But I too am leaning toward the Stanford approach for many different reasons that have already been stated, but also in favor of getting it done. But to Lenny Roberts' point, or her mother's point, I guess, which was to take the time to do it right. So, yeah, I'm leaning toward the Stanford approach and taking the time necessary to do this right. Thank you.
I had a couple of comments. I too think that we should proceed with the alternative approach. First, I wanted to commend Mr. Porter for your presentation, because it really is just a fundamental policy decision. I thought you did a good job kind of laying out the pros and the cons. And there are cons to the alternative, time and money. But there's been many remarks made about the water board with respect to the San Francisco Creek project. And I do think that the original proposal would have, it was my instinct, is we have a hard time with the water board. I do think we have considerably better chances with the water board with the alternative proposal. Although that said, that proposal itself could potentially, will not necessarily sail through the water board either. And as Mr. Porter is well aware, and the water board now seems to want to connect projects, not look only at the project itself, but also at ancillary things related to the broader environment, such as runoff or so they're taking they appear, at least in the San Francisco case, they're taking a much broader view of a project far beyond, the confines of the work. So my advice there would be is we can't engage them soon enough, assuming we're going, because that is going to be some heavy lifting. I would really like to see us commit ourselves to do the work in the summer of 15-16, if we adopt the alternative. I mean, again, I don't know enough to say whether that's impossible, but I mean, that really should be our concerted goal. In any project, it takes a lot of time, but where we see opportunities to expedite things, we're going to have to get through one winter for sure, 14-15, and the more winters, the more risk. So I would hope we could get it done in that time frame. And then my final comment was, again, if we go with this alternative approach, which I do favor, is to make sure that PG&E and others are, make sure they're prepared to take whatever emergency measures are needed if we really do have a severe, we ought to assume we'll have a severe winter for planning purposes. Think back to what happened the last time we had such a storm, and kind of plan now for that worst case, because it is something we got to remedy. So those are my thoughts. Supervisor Tissier?
Yeah, I just wondered if I could ask, I believe it's Catherine Poulter, if I could just ask her a couple quick questions. So I certainly appreciate the interest that Stanford has in trying to find a better alternative. I guess just two questions I have just to kind of tie it together. In our memo and also yours, Stanford's offered the possibility of being able to access your land or Stanford's land, and it's been sort of a verbal agreement. If we move this forward today with the alternative, are you able at this time to put that in writing so so we don't get down to the end and find out that maybe someone else objects to us using your land? I mean, to me, that's very important, because if we're going to go this alternative, we have to be pretty sure we can access your land. That's number one. And then the second question, at this time, it indicates that you haven't agreed to provide any funding. And I guess the question I was asking earlier is there any possibility, or has that door been shut?
With regard to the first one, I should be able to put something in writing about the access, because we absolutely feel that way. With regard to the funding, I think at this point, we really don't know what the project involves. So the door is not shut. We're ready to keep talking, working with your staff. And so it's not a shut door. It's just at this point, there's not enough known to be able to commit any money.
Okay. It just, especially the part about the access, I think it's important that we have something. So as we move forward with these agencies, they know that you guys are willing to do that, so this quote-unquote softer approach is real.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
President Pine, if I can just interject a quick note, because I know there's a lot of discussion about the importance of timing here. It's based on my recollection, and Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, because the federal government has jurisdiction over this matter, this project, there's one type of permit you get from the California Water Board. If they didn't, it would be a different type of permit. But because they do, it's this kind of permit. And based on this kind of permit, the California Water Board has 1 year from the date of 1 year from the date of the complete application to get it done. So just keep that in mind in terms of timing. They only have a year from the application being complete.
Certainly. Just to add to that, I think in the case of San Francisco Creek, what they did there was they took their full year, and with 1 week to go on that deadline, they issued a letter denying the permits without prejudice.
Right.
Which means that
Extended the
they decided not to issue the permits, but they gave a little bit of advice as to what they might look at next time. So that 1 year can turn into multiple years, unfortunately, in that case. I'm not saying that'll happen here, but it's possible.
Right, and to my earlier point, hopefully an early engagement with the water board, it might make that review process less than a year. Because if it takes a year, then we're certainly at 15, 16.
Certainly.
Any other comments?
Would it be appropriate for me to make a motion to support the alternative, the Stanford alternative for the Alpine Road or Los Trancas Creek?
Yes.
I'll second that.
It's motion and seconded that we direct Public Works to pursue the alternative approach. There's a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, our next item is a presentation and discussion concerning responding to adults with serious mental illness, including the Family Assertive Support Team.
Oh, I know, I get rid of it.
So I think that's something we've all been looking forward to. There's been so much discussion in the press about individuals with serious mental illness and how to best assist them. So, Mr. Kaplan, we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, President Pine, board members, Mr. Maltby and Mr. Byers. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you one of our newest Mental Health Service Act funded programs, the Family Assertive Support Team that we've added to our adult system of care. Operated by Mateo Lodge, the staff is here, and they'll be providing some overview of the program and some stories about some of the individuals they've engaged since their inception, I think 8 to 10 months ago. But I'd also like to take this opportunity to provide you with an overview of our overall efforts in responding to individuals in our adult system or not in our adult system who are experiencing a crisis and their families as well. We believe that the things that we've been able to accomplish over the last several years far exceeds what is possible under Laura's Law as currently written. And I'm going to go through a slide to give you a sense of what that means in terms of our assessment. You're aware that we've been working for a number of years with our stakeholder partners, including family members and clients, to remedy some of the gaps in our mental health system of care. So I'd like to review with you a chart that looks at some of the issues that family members have shared with us that is of most concern to them, what responses we have in place, and to compare with what our interpretation of Laura's Law would provide for those same issues that family members discuss with us. So on the left are the things that we've had conversations with our family members. It's clear that they want someone to call when their loved one is in crisis, other than the police department. That's no knock on the police department, but they're looking for some alternatives before law enforcement has to be involved. Because when law enforcement's involved, the options shrink, basically. So in the middle are a number of things that families do have access to. Our access and call center, family members can call and present information on their loved one. The Family Assertive Support Team, which you'll hear about. We have a suicide prevention hotline and our full service partnerships. Laura's Law, family members can ask to petition the mental health director, in this case myself, to begin a process of evaluation to see if somebody would meet the criteria for Laura's Law as currently in statute. Family members also want help when their loved one does not know he or she is ill. And we have a number of things in our county. We have conservatorship, which I'll talk a little bit more about. In addition to the FAST team operated by Mateo Lodge, they have a community outreach team that's operated for many years in concert with family members to try to approach individuals who may or may not recognize the severity of their illness. We have the SMART team, which is our paramedic response team that upon referral from the police, can respond in the community. These are specially trained paramedics that can intervene. And for Laura's Law, assuming somebody is eligible, then there would be a referral to assisted outpatient treatment. The other thing family members tell us is they want a place for their loved one to go other than jail, other than the psychiatric hospital. And your board in our Measure A presentation approved funding to acquire a mental health respite center. We have not found a place as of yet, but we're actively looking. And that center would be just that alternative where adults could go for brief periods of time to relax, get evaluated, interact with peers, and hopefully get themselves engaged in treatment post the respite center. Whoops. Family members also talk to us about the issue of involuntary medication, but without requiring their loved ones to be in an institution. So there's a couple things. When somebody is institutionalized, in order to receive involuntary medication, there's something called a Reese hearing, where there has to be information that would suggest a finding to involuntary medicate. But we also have a large number of individuals on community conservatorship, where they're getting intensive community-based services, but also involuntarily receiving their medication. And we don't believe Laura's Law addresses that. And then the issue of involuntary outpatient treatment when their loved one actually refuses to participate in treatment. Again, we have community conservatorships that offer intensive-based services. Laura's Law would put somebody into an assisted outpatient treatment, but if the person refuses to attend, they're not compelled to participate. Now, the other thing that is really important is that while we're focused a considerable amount of time and attention on adults with crises, your board has been very clear about the need for prevention and to really start looking at the very front end of a trajectory to divert people that may, without those kinds of services, experience later in life a mental health crisis. And we have a number of things that we've been doing, much of which is funded by Measure A, and we're in that process. So we have the Parenting Project, which is now conducting classes. I think we've trained 49 parents since Measure A approval. Youth Mental Health First Aid, which we're working closely with our schools, and we've trained, I think, 120 school adult allies since receiving that funding. We've hired the staff to expand our outpatient referrals to receive school referrals for non-seriously emotionally disturbed kids. We've amended the contract with Family Services Agency to provide an early intervention for young people experiencing a bipolar. We have, for the last 3 years, been involved in incorporating trauma-informed care throughout our system of care, and we're receiving actually some international recognition in how we've applied some evidence-based practices. The MHSA, Prevention and Early Intervention, provides services throughout our community. We've really upped the work done on our stigma-free San Mateo, which will help people receive treatment without feeling stigmatized, and we have our PrEP program, et cetera. None of those prevention efforts are addressed in Laura's Law. So we do agree with advocates for Laura's Law that people with serious mental illness who are unaware of their disease and their illness should get treatment. However, in most counties in California, that can only happen while he or she is in an institution. What frustrates families and mental health providers is that in most counties, when you're released from the institution and from the requirement to take meds, if you had been doing better, there's a high chance of decompensation. And then far too many people begin the vicious cycle that we've seen so many times before that we're all trying to prevent. However, as it currently is stated, the advocates in the legislation for Laura's Law, that's one of the things they were trying to address, is this kind of repetitive, vicious cycle to interrupt that so people can stay in treatment and stabilize. But what's critical to understand is that from our perspective, the ability to keep people in treatment is not addressed in Laura's Law. They only left the judge, essentially, with the ability to order somebody in outpatient treatment, but remove the power of the court to enforce it. If the Laura's Law was implemented and a person refused to go, just flat out refused, the judge could not hold them in contempt of court, and they could not hold them they would have insufficient evidence for an involuntary civil commitment. So from our perspective, as written, the law does not have the teeth to enforce somebody to maintain themselves in treatment, which is a major flaw in the legislation. We also strongly agree with advocates that people should not be forced to be institutionalized to take medication. And that's one of the good things about San Mateo. Just under 60%, or about 205 people who are conserved in San Mateo County, actually live in the community. They are not in institutions. That stands out for San Mateo. We're one of a few counties whose court and district attorney and others really allow us to use that option. So those people are living in the community, receive intensive services, and are receiving their medications. Some of these individuals receive our full service partnerships, which you're familiar of through the Mental Health Services Act. If such a person refuses to take their medication, we're able to take that person to our psych emergency and involuntary medicate them. So we believe the current tools that we have far exceed the limitations of Laura's Law. So in San Mateo County, we have what Laura's Law advocates, we think, want. It's certainly, in our conversation with family members, in line with what they've expressed to us, which is a means to treat their loved ones who are mentally ill, who may or may not recognize the severity of their illness while they can live in the community. We have many other programs that are not even contemplated by Laura's Law, as I mentioned, and we will continue to develop to look at the gaps in our system. One of the things we are doing is in responding to a grant at the state for increasing crisis response, we really stepped back and looked at all the different kinds of things that are going on in response to mental health crises, and we have quite a bit. But what we realized, they're not really organized in kind of a systematic way. So we're going to convene shortly a way to bring the various entities together so that we're all talking about how, as a unit, as a system, we're responding to crises in the community, how we can better leverage each other's resources, work on where existing gaps are, and really pull together the collective expertise of that group. So now I want to shift so you can hear really some really great things from an investment of our Mental Health Services Act through our Family Assistance Support Team, Assertive Support Team. I want to say that the development of this idea that ultimately led to the actual implementation was something that we worked in collaboration with members from NAMI. This was really in response to something that they wanted to see, and working with them, we've been able to make it happen. And we just had a presentation about a month ago at Behavioral Health and Recovery Services from this great team, and we were just really so impressed with the work that they're doing that we wanted to share with your board. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian Adamson, who I think most or all of you know. Ian is well, what can you say about Ian? He's provided a level of service in San Mateo County for so many years to so many people that actually nobody else wanted to really deal with. So we really have a lot of appreciation and gratitude to Ian, but he'll do the introduction.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here again. It's been a while. Supervisor Pine, Supervisors, Mr. Maltby and Council, it's great to be here, and it's nice to renew old acquaintances. Supervisor Horsley and I have collaborated many years, criminal justice, mental health type stuff, so it's great to be here for that. First thing I want to say, because I don't get this pulpit very often, is I do want to say thanks to the supervisors in this county, past and present, for having the wisdom to fund non-profits like ours. I'm the CEO of Mateo Lodge Incorporated. We were formed in 1975, about the same time that the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill was forming here and in Wisconsin. And it's now gone over the whole country. That's the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. They were involved in the formation of my organization. And we've given you all a folder, which has some pretty snazzy publicity in it, and some none of it's solicited. It's all free press publicity that the journalists in different publications like San Jose Mercury and the Journal, which is this one, they've all come because they've heard about what we're doing and wanted to find out about what we had to say and to see what we were doing. It wasn't like I called them and asked them to come. So in those folders, there is a green little booklet here put out by Zellerback. And what that talks about is the initial support team that we started in 1986. And I started that team as a result of listening to family members telling me that their loved ones were not getting any help by the existing system. Typical story was they'd come into the clinic maybe once and then they'd never come again, or a person would come and see them and do the best to engage them into services, but it didn't work and they backed off. So we established that support team to help homeless mentally ill and to help people. And where we absolutely specialize in my organization is for people that don't think they have an illness. Many people, up to a third of mentally ill people, don't believe they have an illness. And inside this booklet, there's a letter from the author of the legislation, AB 2541, Bruce Bronson, Democrat, Fresno, excuse me. And he says in the second paragraph in that letter, every other emergency team I know throughout the state is gearly sold towards making decisions of involuntary commitment. The support team is a refreshing alternative. I hear rave reviews from clients, families, and my staff about the concrete help that the team gives. So we've had that specialist niche of trying to reach out to people that don't think they have a problem. We like that challenge, and we're determined. The new effort that we have is called the FAST team, the Family Assertive Support Team. How that differs is that this team specializes in family situations where the loved ones are living at home. Now we have members of the team here. They're all superstars in my book, and they all practice my maxim, which we are the people that work with people with mental illness. We don't talk about it, we do it. The final thing I want to say is that we have a board member here in the audience, and we also have a family member that we've actually helped recently, and you're welcome to ask them any questions. And with that, I'm going to hand over to somebody mentioned a paratrooper earlier. Our star elite paratrooper is Matt Sweeney, and he's going to take over from me. Matt.
About a million years ago, that was true. So thank you, board, for having us here so we could tell you about our program. My name is Matt Sweeney. I've been working with Ian for about 20 years on the mobile support team, and now with our new FAST team, I'm the program director. So I'm here to introduce our team to you, and then after that we'll have some vignettes. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Ned Brasher. He's the clinical director. He's a licensed MFT. Probably a lot of you folks know him. He came out of retirement. He used to run Coastside Mental Health and Central County Mental Health, and he was so enamored of this team that he came out of his retirement to help us out. Secondly, we have Dr. Young. She's a board certified psychiatrist, Harvard trained, and she's also on our team. She's Mandarin speaking, so she helps us with any folks that are Mandarin speaking, which is one of the largest amount of folks in the county here. Nancy Wilson is our peer specialist, and she's also a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. She's right back over here. Bonnie McNamara is a family support specialist, and Michelle Lugo is also a family support specialist, and she handles our Spanish-speaking clients. So we take a multidisciplinary approach. We're working with folks that either have had difficulty accessing the mental health services because of their lack of insight, or people that are also very early in their onset of mental illness and have not, gotten had the full wreckage of what comes without treatment. So next we'll be presenting 3 cases as a snapshot representation of the work the FAST team has been performing thus far in the last several months. Thank you.
Almost good afternoon. Thank you for having us here today. My hopes for today's presentation that we're presenting will reassure the board that we are doing everything possible to make sure that serious mentally ill clients are not falling through the cracks. The county does have extensive programs that help these people, and we're just like an offshoot of that. So what brings to mind is a client that I've been working with for the past 8 months. He was diagnosed at the age of 18 with paranoid schizophrenia with command hallucinations. For the past 10 years, he's been in institutions. The longest stay out of that institution was 2 weeks. I've been working with him now for 8 months. He's been on his own for 6 months, has not been back to the hospital. I'm not saying that we work miracles, but it took me alongside of him, and I'm still working with him to help him become a member of society, and he's doing just that. So, I mean, that's a success. Some of our clients do rotate back into the hospital, but we're there when they get out. So, we're going to keep trying. So I hope that eases somebody's mind. I mean, I know our county residents are concerned with some of these cases that we have going on, but we are doing the best that we can, and San Mateo County can do it. I have faith in our director.
Hi, everyone. I haven't ever talked here before or anything like this, so just forgive me if I make a mistake. I want to say something. What I want to say is the first time I am a family member, which means I've been there, done that, with a loved one who had a mental illness. And when I went away for some training that NAMI had, I remember walking into the room and the guy had a shirt on that said, "Lower your standards." And I thought that was just kind of a weird thing to have, on the shirt. And because I think to myself, what parent in their right mind would ever want their child to lower their standards? They're born, they're the president, right? Okay. So, but that doesn't mean lowering the standards in this term doesn't mean accepting unhealthy situations. And the result is the opposite. It means accepting your loved one's limitations and developing and creating a new and promising future for them, where they're at. Doing the same thing and expecting different results. Some say that is the definition of crazy. So I believe we are doing something different, and we on the FAST team believe this is why the program is working, because thanks to San Mateo County for giving us a chance, we are proving with each client that this is quickly becoming a very successful program, and that it is working and bringing very good results, because we go to them, we meet them where they are. As unique and different as each situation is, there are some commonalities among them also. There is a thread that is woven into most of our cases, which is that our clients will not reach out for help. Some of these have been going through it for years, ongoing, without any positive results. Often it gets worse, and families don't know what to do or where to turn. People, no matter how sick, respond eventually, because we go to them, we reach out to them, and when you listen without judgment and you offer compassion and empathy and hope, it is truly amazing how these once desperate situations turn around. This program is also working because we are a dedicated team who offers a variety of lived experiences and professional guidance. In the past, it was a client that got the treatment. However, we cannot just treat the patient, we need to treat the whole family. Oftentimes, we come into a situation where the families have become caught up in the sickness and the rituals of their loved one. They too become isolated and fear what their peers might think if they only knew what was really going on behind their closed door. If you think about when your own child, was going through their terrible twos, you decided to stay home for dinner rather than going out into a public place because you worry that that the child's going to throw a fit, won't sit still, will wander around the restaurant only to have to be chased down by an exhausted parent who wonders why they even bothered to attempt a single outing. Anyone that has kids has experienced this at some point. Well, this is similar to what our families feel. Sometimes they're not sure what is going to upset their loved one, not sure if they can sit still, or will they be too antsy in the loud setting of a public restaurant or whatever. So families will often choose to stay home. It's just so much easier. So little by little, they stop going on vacations, visiting with neighbors or friends. It just becomes too much. They basically become prisoners of their loved ones and their sickness. Worry, isolation, and fear grips them, and they can no longer function in a healthy way in their lives. So if we as a society want good results, lasting results, and productive outcomes, we need to not only treat the client, but the family, and make them a part of our team. They become part of the solution. We help connect them to resources such as NAMI and educate them on proven methods of treatment plans and encourage them to not give up, but to proceed through and show them it can be done. We help them to think outside the box, and we also help them to accept the things they cannot change the things they can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So in closing, I want to say, I love my job. I'm proud to say I work for Mateo Lodge, and I'm very proud of the efforts that San Mateo County Mental Health has provided us. And I'm very sorry, I'm supposed to tell you about one of my clients that I reached out to, that I went to her, and she was inside for 6 years in her house. And I happened to know and familiar with what she was going through, so I happened to connect with her. Because we all are a team, whoever connects the best. And, I got to witness her going into a grocery store for the first time in years. I got to see her go, drive around, take long walks. When she went into a store, there were so many new things to buy. She's like, oh my God. It was like a kid in the candy store. She was a young girl who had a job in a bank for years. Things happen. It hits all of us in some way. So it's a very rewarding job to see people living lives again, and happy lives, not just living, not just existing. Thank you.
I can't believe you haven't spoken in front of a crowd before.
I have, but not to you guys.
Hi there.
Did a good job.
I'm going to present the final case, and that was a 48-year-old woman, had never been diagnosed before, never been in treatment before. And the mobile support team went out, Matt went out during weekdays, and Armando went out on weekends. And they were looking for an opportunity to do an involuntary hospitalization because she'd become very psychotic living at home. She returned at home about 3 months prior to our involvement in the case, when she finally lost her last job and couldn't work anymore. So we got involved, the FAST team got involved on her 27th day, hospitalized at 3AB. She eventually ended up in the hospital. And Bonnie went to the family first, talked to the mother, and found out that there was a son who was a meth addict living in the garage as an added stress for the mother. And but otherwise found that there was a lot of good supportive members of the family, a doctor in the family, other people in the family that were involved in caring about what was happening. When the woman was up at 3AB, she wouldn't talk to any of the staff. She wouldn't engage. And so she eventually ended up at Cordilleras. And when she got to Cordilleras, she wouldn't engage with staff either. So 2 weeks after our initial involvement with the family, Nancy and I went up to Cordilleras to meet with Dr. Quambeck and to discuss, how we could work together. And that was kind of the first administrative decision we'd made, was that if wherever the client goes, we're going to follow them. So we went ahead and went to Cordilleras because the family wants support at that time more than any other time. They're really wanting the support to continue. And of course, the client, we're still looking for opportunities to engage with them. When we talked to Dr. Quambeck, we were all concerned about the late onset of schizophrenia, because usually it occurs in the 20s or early 30s at the latest. And as we did more investigation with the family, we found out that some signs and symptoms were noted as far back as 10 years ago. But she had managed to function with employment and so on without treatment. But the real deterioration had taken place about 3 months prior to getting there. The other thing that was going on was that the entire time she was at 3AB, she wouldn't take a shower, and already at Cordillera, she wouldn't take a shower. So we all were trying to figure out why she wasn't. We had our own speculations. Maybe she thinks that people are spying on her while she's in the shower. We had different speculations. But we decided on another intervention at that meeting with Dr. Klombeck, was to go back to the family and relatives and to see if people would start visiting her, that she might be more likely to open up to those people than she would to open up to staff. Because the reason she wouldn't open up to staff was she was in denial of the mental illness, and she thought she was having her civil liberties taken away. She had nothing wrong with her, and she shouldn't be there. And so we did find a relative that did know that the reason she wasn't taking the showers, she thought the towels would be dirty in that kind of a setting. And so then Nancy came up with the idea to get towels that were fresh out of the box from the retail store that had never been used by anybody, and that got her taking a shower. So that's some of the kind of creativity we get from our peer providers. The other big concern that Dr. Klombeck and I had was whether this was in fact schizophrenia, and between my 35 years of knowledge in community mental health and between his MD degree and all of his experience, we both ended up having the same meeting of the minds that we thought it was schizophrenia, because if it were drug-induced psychosis, they usually present very differently. They usually have more energy. They usually have areas of insight. They're not so vegetative as she was. There was still a possibility of a tumor, and we decided that we'd do an MRI to try to rule out a tumor if there was something like that going on. And so that's kind of the advocacy we're doing with the family, trying to help with those kind of things. I guess in closing on that case, she ended up finally responding to antipsychotic medication. She went a long time before she had any response. They finally found the right pharmaceuticals to get her to respond. She was well enough to go to Redwood House as a discharge plan for 30 days. And then we'd planned another 6 to 18 months in a psychosocial rehabilitation program, Wally's Place, run by Mateo Lodge. But then she managed to convince Ian that she didn't need that program and that she was ready to go on with her life. And Ian was genuinely convinced that she had just recovered so well and looked so good that she could go back to live with the mom, and the mom agreed with that too. So she went back to live with the mom, became employed part-time, and is very assertive about finding full-time work. She's putting out resumes all over the place, interviewing a lot. So she's already back to work. One of the advantages of my having gone out to Dr. Klombeck was Mom had called me up when she first got a call from either an RN or the head of the unit at Cordilleras that they had decided that she had schizophrenia. And Mom called me up to say, to really check with that, because she was in denial and disbelief that her daughter could have schizophrenia after all these years and after having done so well in her life, So by having discussed it thoroughly, I was able to tell her why I was in agreement with the schizophrenia diagnosis, and mentioned the fact that as far as we knew, that she'd always been clean and sober and that it wasn't due to substance abuse. And with that, the mom was in agreement with me. She says, oh, definitely she was not involved in substance abuse. That has nothing to do with it. And I told her that we'd still pursue the MRI when she was ready, because at that time she was still too early in the illness, and without response to the medication, they didn't want to have her off-site into the hospital yet. So I said that we would rule out that possibility, but I thought it was highly unlikely that the MRI would show anything. And the other thing I did was to give her hope, and I just wanted to close with that, was there was a study by Courtney Harding where she took people with schizophrenia in the back wards and did a 30-year retrospective study, and found that 68% of those people had significantly recovered. And the definition of significant recovery is 3 out of the 4 following things, and full recovery is all 4. First is no longer showing psychiatric symptoms. Second is not on any kind of financial entitlement programs. Third is has a social support system in place. And fourth is no longer on medication. So this client's already on the way towards significant recovery in that she's not on financial entitlement. We have the support system in place, and she is employed. You know, so the only one that she still has is the on medication. And so, but that we tell people the stories like that or research like that, so because otherwise they feel totally in hopelessness and despair that anything can happen. And with that, we open it up to questions for the team or for anybody here.
Thank you for all for those presentations, and this particular case studies you informed us of. It's very inspiring, very impressive. Do we have questions from board members?
Not really a question, but just to say thank you so much. Those are just terrifically inspiring stories.
Just pretty much what Supervisor Grimm said. They are really inspiring. And I do remember working with Ian Adamson on an options program to get people out of correctional facilities. And the programs like that do work. Case management does work. The family service teams do in fact work, or family support teams do in fact work. I've seen it. They make a remarkable difference in people's lives. It's the right thing to do, and I'm really glad that we were able to pass Measure A to be able to support additional programs for mental health.
I just had a quick question. First off, you do tremendous work, and you should be very proud of the work you're doing. And also, Steve Kaplan, the work he's doing is phenomenal as well, so in our health department. I just have one question. I'm looking at your slides. And under client ethnicity, it looks like, are there cultural barriers that exist right now for people sort of reporting mental illness within their families? Because if you look at the graph, it starts very high with Caucasian and really pretty much takes a major dip. And I just wonder if there's that whole issue around stigma, or are we not doing enough outreach in those communities, or what gives us those
I think a
numbers?
surprise to me was the number of Persian families that we ended up having. We had something like 4, and I didn't even know that was necessarily a thing. And one thing, and that hasn't happened. That's really happened by chance. They haven't been referring each other. Each family came in separately. Yeah, and we still have on our mission is to get out there on publicizing that we exist. And we're on the county website, and we're in Wellness Matters, which is a way to get the word out. NAMI knows about us, and mobile support team, case finding. But I think we have to actually get out into different specific communities where we're going after the specific targeted population groups, going to their churches, going to places they assemble, places they go, and getting the word out that we exist. And the other thing that helps with that, of course, is if your staff is, we have one Spanish-speaking staff, so we have somebody that can help us with the Spanish-speaking. Having the Chinese psychiatrist helps in terms of we can use her for Mandarin speaking. But the more, if we interviewed somebody that was African-American but had, prison records, that we couldn't hire him for that reason. But so we need to, the pipeline of the peer providers would be good to keep expanding that. And of course, as maybe a FAST program gets additional funding in the future, there could be second teams where you'd get more minority and ethnic groups on the team. That might help.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to that, I think most of you are aware of the work that we're doing through J Africa's Office of Diversity and Equity, where we've organized initiatives around very specific ethnic and cultural populations. So that's one pipeline for us to look at this data and to look at ways to get out. There's also a couple other venues that we have in East Palo Alto. We work with, we have the Behavioral Health Advisory Group with members of the community, and we can insert fast presentation to them as a way of getting information out. And then similarly in the North County, we have the North County Outreach Collaborative. So I think we have the vehicles available to us to insert, just getting the marketing out for the program.
Thank you, Steve.
And just very briefly, in terms of outreach to the minority communities, through the local South County Mental Health, we have 2 positions that are Spanish-speaking that are reaching out to that community that are Mateo Lodge employees. Also on our support team, we have full-time Spanish-speaking capability plus Mandarin. Plus the other thing, which is in the packet you have, is a letter from San Francisco State Nursing College and University, I should say, and we intern their nurses every month, and so we have virtually the language capacity of any country in the world. That we can take these young nursing students. They love to come on interventions with us. So if a family calls us up and they're Hmong and they need help, we can find somebody who can speak that language, go out with the team, with that person. Thank you. Oh, and the other very important thing about the FAST team and every other service we do in terms of support team, our FAST team, absolutely free thanks to the funding that's come through the Proposition 63 through the county and yourselves. Thank you.
I had a question just to learn a little bit more about the issue with people who need medication but won't, don't take it. So my understanding from this presentation and my prior readings is that it's a very limited environment where you can require and have involuntary medication. If you're in certain institutional settings and in certain conservatorship settings, but it's pretty limited. But it's also my sense that there's, particularly among the homeless population, individuals who, if they took their medication, the chances of them, getting in a more stable environment really be improved. So it just seems like such a conundrum because you read about someone who is just living in this terrible situation, outside, with all kinds of health problems. And the core problem for that individual is the failure to take their medication, right? And so with the people of this caliber, I guess you can get them there, but it seems like still, I guess I'm trying to understand that kind of how many people really, are in this predicament where they would be better off if they took their medication, but won't. And then we have great people like the folks that join us today who can be very effective in getting them to do that. But my sense is there's still a lot of people out there that we can't. It still seems like a real conundrum to me. So I don't know if maybe the answer is more Mateo Lodges, but it's a conundrum. And when you see someone outside sleeping outside, and it's bad for them, it's bad for the community, it's bad for everybody that they're not taking their medication, but there's very limited circumstances when you can require someone to do that. So I just kind of worry about that. I think about that conundrum. I don't know if there's anything you want to share about that.
Yeah, so Jean Fraser, the health system, I think the thing to understand or to try to contemplate is there really has to be a balance between the rights of people to self-determine the course of their lives and the need for some people or the reality that some people don't have insight. The law in California has traditionally really been, I would say, if you saw that as a balance, it has been more of a focus on the rights of the individuals. And that comes out of the history, which is not a pretty history.
Understood.
So I would say Laura's Law is honestly an outgrowth of the reaction to exactly what you are seeing. Unfortunately,
But if I could interrupt,
Yeah,
Laura's
please.
Law doesn't
does
have
not.
anything in there about involuntary medication.
Correct. That was actually it. The proponents went to the state and said that was exactly what they wanted, was people like those who are homeless, exactly the people we're talking about. We want them to get medication without having to go through this vicious cycle of the hospitalization, and that was gutted in Sacramento by the advocates who were so concerned about the misuse of this power. So yes, there are limited circumstances, but we are lucky to be in a county where they are much broader than almost any other county. So I've been in touch with San Francisco, and I've actually explained to them how we do it here, and they are very interested in pursuing the same route there because they really face this conundrum because their judges will not keep people on conservatorship once they are released. Alameda was looking at Laura's Law, but the advocates for the mentally ill, in fact, have pushed against it for a variety of reasons.
Maybe you're making a point I missed before. So you're saying that our use of conservatorships is more expansive than others?
It is far broader than any county I've experienced with.
Oh, okay. I had not connected those dots because that is one of the few mechanisms for requiring medication.
Yes.
Can I add something on medication? You know, it'd be different if the medication was pretty benign and you could just take the medication and you would be normal. It is not. And there are side effects. And so that's one of the reasons that people who are mentally ill don't want to take it. There are some significant side effects.
I guess the last thing I would say, medication alone doesn't do it for the people we're talking about. It's just one piece of the whole construction of what needs to happen. That's why we think this model, as well as the full service partnership model, is really the model where you can get people their medication, but wrap around services, including housing if needed. But to just medicate people just isn't going to be the answer to this solution.
In full service partnerships and in this fantastic FAST model, for the most part, people are taking medication, right? And then of course they have all the other supports, which, as you say, are so critical. It's it's that population who I guess can't be who turn away from FAST and full service partnership.
Well, we're really encouraged by this the early data from FAST, and certainly one of the things we would be exploring based upon what you were saying, Supervisor Pine, about the gap, who are we still not reaching out to?
Right.
It would be one of the things we would look at to see whether or not we would need to increase the FAST capacity to be more available at more times for more people.
Thank you.
Yep.
In answer to your question, Ian Adamson, Mateo Lodge, one of the things we find is once a person is homeless and on the street, it's a lot harder to help them. One of the things we do to address that is we meet with all the police jurisdictions every single month and we discuss cases that are on the street and we try to come up with strategies. One of the reasons why the FAST team model and support team models are so successful is we get to know the families. The first thing we do is meet with the families, get an extensive history, and one of the byproducts of that involvement and the time we spend with them is that they trust us. And so then we're working as a family. So literally, even with people that are on the streets, we're in touch with their families, maybe out of state, maybe wherever they are, but we're uniting the families to bring everything that can be done to bear so that we can help these people and reach out to them. And medication is a very important part of that, but it's not the only part. Right. But the trust and working together as a family is an important part. Thank you.
We do have two speakers. So any other board comments? I'll have I'll ask Martin Fox, followed by Judith Staples.
I always try to start out finding points to agree with people on, and if you take a look at what I've highlighted, and this is Dr. Tsai's words, not mine, establishing flexible and therapeutic relationship with clients within the evidence-based paradigm of assertive community treatment is the foundation of effective assisted outpatient treatment. And what you have heard is a description of that foundation. What you haven't heard is you haven't heard the facts. I'm not going to argue that people can have their own opinions upon the law. The facts, I'm sorry. And the facts here were determined by the United States Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, after a study of 3 studies. It took over a year and a half to show that assisted outpatient treatment is effective. And the reason that it's effective is the same reason that cops can be effective when they do community-based policing. And that is, they don't force medication, they coerce it. They walk up and say, hey, I'm going to keep coming back and asking you about this because I'm concerned about you. And they keep coming back and they keep coming back. That's what Judge Anderson does up in Nevada County. That's what Dr. Southard down in Los Angeles County saw when he went up there. That's why Dr. Southard is recommending full implementation of Laura's Law and expanding the number of treatment slots from 20 to 360. The facts are the facts. Regurgitating the old Mitch Katz arguments they haven't worked. And they're not going to work. Mitch Katz is gone from San Francisco. Laura's Law works. The Department of Justice has studied it from 3 different points of view, and they've said that it works. That's why assertive community treatment works. It's part of Laura's Law. The part that's missing is the part where Judge Anderson and other judges like him give people the choice of writing their own treatment plan. And they keep coming back and they keep coming back until they get their treatment plan right. Mentally ill people are just mentally ill. They're not stupid. They will respond to what's called the black robe effect. That's right. There is no forced treatment in Laura's Law. That's over in the Lanterman-Peaches Short Act. That's something a judge like Judge Anderson can do when he says, hey, you're not on your treatment plan, you're getting worse. I want you to go over and get an assessment.
If I could ask you to wrap up, Mr. Fox.
Persons living with mental illness who do not understand their need to seek treatment voluntarily will continue to refuse treatment as long as they are allowed to escape responsibility. The people who help them are a stain on the collective conscience of reasonable people that recognize the right to make decisions about treating one's mental illness is one limited by the community's right to health and safety. Adopt healthy incentives is what Laura's Law is all about for helping those people with untreated mental illness. And please reject the narcissistic fear-mongering used to shield the recovery racket. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Fox had a card in earlier, which I deferred to now, so I did give him a little extra time. And we do have one more speaker, Judith Staples.
President Pine, Supervisors, Council, I'm Judith Staples. I have a 23-year-old grandson who has lived with me since he was 11. He suffers from bipolar disorder, and several years ago we learned about Mateo Lodge. And indeed, they are superstars, every single one of them. Matt came and did an intervention on Tony about 2.5 years ago, and we got him into hospitalized treatment. But at that point, there was no FAST team. They were a team, but the FAST team wasn't all together with all these really precious, knowledgeable people. Well, meanwhile, Tony did fairly well on his medications. The psychiatrist he had was sort of not very effective, and that was through an insurance company that you didn't have a lot of choices with. And so eventually, Tony decided that he wanted to go off of his medications, and as Supervisor Horsley said, they don't want to take their medications. And Tony had recently said to me, "Grandma, imagine if you had to wear a scuba diving suit and a mask. You couldn't move and you can't communicate." And that's how he says the medications make him feel. So with the psychiatrist's understanding and my understanding that Tony was going to try and decrease his medication, I'm kind of white on rice, and I could watch for all of the symptoms, and indeed, they surfaced again within about 9 months. So my son, Tony's father, contacted Matt again, and Matt was probably at our house in 20 minutes. I guess Tony had remembered his car, because when he saw Matt's car, he said, "Oh no, an intervention." And initially, he didn't want to go into treatment. He said, and Matt pointed out to him, "You're going to have to, if you went to a shelter and you treated the people in the shelter the way you're treating your grandmother and your father, the next thing will be the street." And Tony said, "Oh, the street would be fine." Well, he's not very street savvy. So I'll wrap it up just by saying that this team is just phenomenal, and Tony is doing so well. He's now at Wally's place. Just yesterday, he said to me, "Grandma, this is the best thing that ever happened."
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very helpful to hear.
That was a good perspective.
And Therese Dyer would also like to speak.
Teresa Dyer, 1408 Crespi Drive, and I'm speaking on the behalf of veterans all over. I come from a military family. My 4 brothers were in World War II. One lost his eyesight on Leyte Island. His 2 sons were in Vietnam. One was shot out of a helicopter. My husband was in 20 years. I was in the reserves and active duty for 6 years. My son was in the service for 3 years. Let me tell you, the veterans do not do an excellent job. I mean, I have been going to the Moffett Field Collaborative where I listen to a lot of cases of PSDT, suicides and all that. A lot of them have been misdiagnosed. A lot of them have been given the wrong medicine. And so therefore, I really support Laura's Law. If we can get any more justice for them, that's what I want to do.
Thank you. I don't believe we have any other speakers. So any final comments by the board members?
I just want to thank this group here that's from the Mateo Lodge. You've done a fabulous job. Steve Kaplan, Jean, done a tremendous job. And I also want to say, you know, I think it's important, as Steve talked about, is that we look at that prevention and early intervention as well. So, you know, hopefully we're working very closely with all of you to continue those services and with the schools, et cetera. So, thank you.
If you want to come to the rostrum, if you have a quick.
I just want to say, I know that Adrian, I've heard of you that you're really an advocate for youth, and I just want to say I'm such an advocate for the early identification programs in our schools. We're treating the ones that didn't have it.
Thank you. All right, again, thanks everyone for joining us today. County Manager, when you are ready.
Mr. President, members of the board, due to the lateness of the hour, I know you have a closed session following this. You have my report. I'll answer any questions you may have. I do have one note to make on the report, and that's with respect to Devil's Slide. Rather than opening on the 21st, it's now going to be the 27th. We have a few last-minute cleanup details to get behind us before it's open to the public, so it'll be on March 27th now. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Malpe? Okay, seeing none, I think we're down to board member reports. That's correct. Who would like to start? Board member reports? Mr. Horsley?
There's two people I'm going to adjourn in memory of Bernadine Kelly. And Bernadine Kelly was a longtime Redwood City resident. She is the mother of Pat Kelly, who's the district attorney's administrative assistant. Bernadine, she was in her early 90s and was diagnosed with lung cancer, and I know my wife gave her a call, and she said when she declined any treatment, she said, well, I've lived long enough. You know, if I could be that graceful at the end of life, I'll be grateful. The other is Maureen Stockner, I guess it's Roche. She was a resident of Redwood City, 56 years of age, passed away at home on February 11th. Born in Redwood City, attended San Carlos schools, graduated in 1975 from Carlmont High School, and attended Kenyatta College and Chico State, survived by her husband and her mother and brothers. And I won't name all of the brothers, but in any case, she was a longtime resident of San Carlos and Redwood City. That concludes my report.
Thank you.
I just learned this morning that South San Francisco Councilwoman Carol Matsumoto's mother died, and Carol has been caring for her mom for a very long time, and so I want to send our best wishes to Carol.
Yes, Carol has been incredibly supportive of her mom, and who I think was 100 years old.
101, to be exact.
You may have some remarks.
That's okay.
I have nothing to report today.
No, I also was going to adjourn in memory of her mom, but Carol did take good care of her, and she did live to be 101. And she still has sisters that are still alive.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So my sympathy goes out to Carol and her family.
Well, you all have in front of you, I think, a memo from the partners of North Fair Oaks Forward and myself. It's a progress report on our work in North Fair Oaks with both the community plan and the umbrella collaboration, North Fair Oaks Forward. And in the interest of time, you could browse through here later. But let me just, I wanted to highlight the new website that's coming online pretty soon for the North Fair Oaks community. Excuse me. And if you could scroll through the page just kind of slowly.
Impressive.
There's a video of the North Fair Oaks Community Council meeting, calendar, and there's a lot of content behind here. One of the things I'm most proud about it is that this site is also in Spanish, so that the Spanish-speaking folks in North Fair Oaks and other areas can come on here and actually, read it. It's not Google Translate; it's real translation. And speaking of that, we have two really outstanding interns that are working with Peggy Jensen on this project, and let me just mention them: Ellie Dahlman and Ashley Quintana, who really are doing an amazing job getting out in the community, developing surveys in Spanish and English, getting out to church groups, and just trying to get more voices involved in the project as we face the issues of, for instance, the changing of the configuration of Middlefield Road. So this website will give the community news and information. There's an event calendar, as you saw. You can actually post comments yourself as a member of the community. And some of our partners have actually been trained on adding up content to this website. So it won't be a static sort of thing. There'll be conversations about issues, community partners contributing content, and hopefully a lot more. And this will, I think, help us really reach out to the community and get those new voices involved in the North Fair Oaks Community Plan. Just quickly then, the Friendship Park, you may remember, is being rebuilt on March 21st, thanks to the Rotary, Sal, County Parks, Shutterfly, and Kaboom. And we're looking forward to that, and maybe some of you, if your calendars are free, could come on March 21st and help us do some hole digging and some other things related to the playground there for the kids. We've been working very hard, Peggy Jensen and her group, on illegal dumping in the North Fair Oaks area, which has been a big problem for quite some time, and actually have developed signs, and the community council has a working group on illegal dumping, and they're making progress. And let me just say, the last thing is on the last page of your memo there, which is the North Fair Oaks Public Art Work Group, which is, I think, very, very cool. There are representatives from the San Mateo Arts Commission and 3 North Fair Oaks council members and community residents that are interested in community art for the neighborhoods. And they actually had their first meeting on March 10th. And some of us took a tour over to Hayward, California, where they have some very cool public art and have done quite a good job with murals and whatnot. And so I think overall there's movement and progress, as you can see. And thanks to my colleagues on the board and the county manager's office for helping fund all this and making all this possible. And the work of Peggy Jensen and those interns that I mentioned has just been stellar. And also to Carol Marks of my staff, who really put this website together and worked with our partners to make it all happen. I don't know if she's listening, but a thank you to her too. That's it. Thank you.
Very impressive, Supervisor Slocum. You have been doing an incredible work in North Fair Oaks. Thank you. No question about that. Well, we're going to adjourn and do a closed session.
Thank you.
Yep. You'd report on our report out for us?
Yes, thank you, President Pine. The board met in closed session to consider the 2700 Middlefield litigation, as well as three pieces of potential litigation. It was discussion only and no final action was taken. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now adjourned.